The training room went dead silent the moment Caleb Brooks dropped all 5 of them. Not one punch, not one kick. Just movement clean, precise, and terrifying in its calm. 5 elite bodyguards, each with military backgrounds and matching smirks, hit the floor in 8 seconds flat. The man standing over them wasn't wearing a badge. He wasn't wearing a uniform with rank or medals. He was wearing a janitor's coveralls and old work boots with dried paint on the left toe. And he was breathing like he'd barely tried. What nobody in that room understood yet, what would change everything before the day was over, was that the man they had laughed at 30 seconds ago was the only reason any of them were still standing. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss where this one goes. The morning started the way most mornings started for Caleb Brooks. 5:45 a.m. His phone alarm went off with the same soft chime he used every day, not because he needed it, but because the sound had become a ritual, a promise, a tiny act of normalcy he built around himself the way other men built walls. He was already awake. He was always already awake. Caleb sat on the edge of his bed in the small 2-bedroom apartment on Garfield Street and listened to the silence for exactly 30 seconds. That was his habit. 30 seconds of nothing before the day took over, before the coffee, before the backpack by the door, before the world outside the window decided what kind of man it was going to treat him as today. He could hear his daughter breathing through the thin wall that separated their rooms. Soft, even, safe. That sound was the only reason any of this made sense. He stood up, moved to the kitchen without turning on the lights, and started the coffee maker using muscle memory. The apartment was small. He knew every step of it without needing to see. 3 steps from the bed to the door. 6 steps to the kitchen. A sharp left to avoid the corner of the counter that had left a bruise on his hip 3 winters ago and never quite let him forget it. He poured himself a cup, leaned against the counter, and stared at the window. Outside, Cincinnati was still dark. The kind of dark that feels like the city is holding its breath. He thought about his daughter, Maya, 8 years old. The kind of 8-year-old who asked questions that made adults go quiet, not because she was trying to be difficult, but because her mind moved in straight lines toward truths that most grown people learn to walk around. Last week she had asked him, "Dad, do people treat you different because of how you look?" He had taken a long breath before answering. "Some people do, baby. Does it make you sad?" He thought about it honestly. He always tried to be honest with her. He thought that was the most important thing a parent could give a child, not a version of the world that didn't hurt, but the tools to understand the version that did. "Sometimes," he said. "But it doesn't change what I know about myself." She had nodded, like that was a satisfying answer, like she was filing it away somewhere. He hoped she was. By 6:15, Caleb had his uniform on, blue maintenance coveralls. His name stitched above the left chest pocket in yellow thread. C. Brooks. The embroidery was a little uneven because the fabric had been washed so many times it had started to pucker. He didn't mind. I wasn't wearing the uniform to impress anyone. He was wearing it because it came with health insurance, a pension contribution, and a predictable schedule that let him be home when Maya got off the school bus at 3:20 every afternoon. He had made a decision 4 years ago that he did not regret. The world he used to live in asked too much of him. It had taken from him things he could never get back. His team, his wife, 2 years of sleep, and a version of himself that he didn't entirely mourn, but that he also didn't want to resurrect. So he had chosen this instead. The small apartment, the maintenance job, the coffee at 5:45, and the school bus at 3:20. He had chosen Maya. That was not weakness. He had to remind himself of that sometimes, because the world had a way of looking at a black man in a maintenance uniform and deciding without asking, without knowing, without any evidence at all, that the uniform was the ceiling of his life and not a door he had chosen to walk through. He had made his peace with that. Most days. Whitmore Technologies occupied 17 floors of the Meridian building downtown, and Caleb's job was to keep floors 3 through 7 running without incident. Lighting, HVAC filters, plumbing calls, The occasional emergency that required him to crawl into spaces that nobody else wanted to go into. He was good at it, not because maintenance was his passion. He had no illusions about that. But because he approached every task the same way he had been trained to approach everything in his previous life, with patience, with precision, and with the understanding that the small things done correctly prevented the catastrophic things from happening at all. His supervisor, a tired man named Gerald, who wore the same cap every day and never asked personal questions, had told him 6 months into the job that he was the best worker Gerald had managed in 20 years. "You don't complain," Gerald said. "You show up. You fix things the right way the first time. I don't know what you did before this, and I don't care. You're exactly what I need." Caleb had appreciated that more than Gerald would ever know. He arrived at the service entrance of the Meridian building at 7:12 a.m., swiped his badge and took the freight elevator to 3. His toolbox was already on the cart from the previous afternoon. He always prepared his equipment the night before another habit, another ritual. The morning was routine. He replaced a burned ballast on floor 4. He recaulked a leaking pipe fitting in the men's room on floor 6. He updated his digital maintenance log on the tablet Gerald had issued him and noted 2 items that needed ordering from the supply department. He ate lunch alone in the service hallway on the 5th floor, sitting on an overturned bucket he kept near the utility closet, eating the sandwich he had packed that morning, turkey on wheat no mustard, because Maya had gotten into his lunch twice in the past month, and she hated mustard, so he had started making her sandwich and his sandwich the same way to avoid the argument. I was thinking about that, about how much of his daily life had been quietly reshaped by a small person who weighed 54 pounds and had opinions about condiments when his radio crackled. "Brooks, you copied Gerald's voice." "Copy," Caleb said. "I need you on 15, right now. One of the HVAC panels in the executive conference suite is showing a fault. There's a government delegation coming in at 1 o'clock, and Whitmore wants that room perfect." Caleb checked his watch. 11:48. "I'll head up now," he said. He didn't think anything of it. He took the freight elevator to 15, walked past the glass-walled offices, where administrative staff tracked him with their eyes the way people sometimes do when something doesn't fit the picture they have in their heads, and found the executive conference suite at the end of the hall. The door was open. Inside, a man in a dark suit was adjusting the thermostat with the careful expression of someone who believed they were solving the problem. Caleb said, "Sir, I'll need to get to the panel behind that wall cover." The man turned. "I was 30-something, square-shouldered, with the specific kind of jaw that comes from a combination of genetics and the conviction that your jaw matters." His name tag identified him as Derek Walsh, Security Liaison. He looked at Caleb, looked at the toolbox, looked at the coveralls. "Your maintenance," he said in a tone that communicated that he had expected someone different. "Yes, sir?" "The delegation is arriving at 1. "I know. I'll be done well before that." Walsh watched him for a moment longer than was necessary, then stepped aside with the body language of someone allowing a child into a room. Caleb noted it without reacting to it and moved to the wall panel. The fault turned out to be a loose wire connection in the secondary air handler. He had it diagnosed and corrected in under 14 minutes. "Done," he said. Walsh looked at the thermostat. "Temperature's already stabilizing." "It should hold fine," Caleb said. "If you see another fault code, call it in before you adjust the thermostat manually. You'll only mask the symptom." Walsh blinked, not used to being given professional instruction by the maintenance man. "Right," he said slowly. Caleb nodded, picked up his toolbox and started for the door. "Hey," Walsh said. Caleb stopped. "There's a security demonstration happening on 17 in about an hour. Private facility. You know the one. I've serviced some of the equipment up there, yes. We've got a calibration issue on one of the impact sensors in the training room. Your department got the ticket." Caleb checked his tablet. It was there, submitted 13 minutes ago. "Just came in. I can take a look after lunch." Walsh studied him for another moment. "Fine, but go through the service entrance. That floor requires badge clearance." "I know how to use my badge," Caleb said quietly. Something in his tone made Walsh stop. Just for a second. Then Walsh looked away, and Caleb walked out. Floor 17. Whitmore Technologies' private security training facility was not something the company advertised on its website or discussed in the lobby brochure. It occupied the entire top floor of the Meridian building, a full suite of rooms that included a tactical training floor, a digital simulation lab, a weapons calibration room, and a conference area that could double as a briefing center. The company's security director, Victor Langford, had overseen the construction of the facility 4 years ago as part of a contract with a government-adjacent defense technology program. Whitmore built systems, security systems, the kind that governments bought for significant amounts of money. It made sense, at least on paper, that the company's own security team should be trained to the same standard as the programs they were selling. Caleb had serviced the building systems on 17 three times in the past 18 months. He knew the layout. He knew where the equipment lived. He knew which corridor had the overhead lighting panel that buzzed when the temperature dropped below 68, and he knew which drain in the locker room backed up if anyone ran hot water for more than 8 minutes straight. He was not intimidated by the floor. He was, however, mildly aware that it made certain people uncomfortable when he appeared on it. He swiped his badge at the service entrance at 12:47 p.m. The door opened. He could already hear voices inside male, loud, the particular register of men performing confidence for each other. He followed the sound to the main training room, pushed the door open, and stopped. The room was larger than the last time he had been in it. They had expanded the training floor, pulled back the walls, and installed new impact paneling that ran floor to ceiling. The calibration issue on the impact sensor would be somewhere along the east wall. But before he could move toward it, he was noticed. There were 5 of them. Caleb recognized the type immediately and completely, the way you recognize weather before it arrives. They were all somewhere between 30 and 40. All in training gear. Dark compression shirts, cargo pants, tactical boots. All built with the kind of professional fitness that comes from not just working out, but being paid to maintain a specific physical standard. 3 of them had the upright posture of former military. 2 had the wider, lower stance of men who had spent time in protection work or law enforcement. They were good. He could see that. And they were looking at him the way men like that sometimes look at men like him. Not with hatred exactly. That would have required too much investment. It was something more casual, and in its own way, more cutting. It was the look of people who have already decided without examination that what they see is all there is. One of them, big, built like a man who had once played college football and decided to stay in that shape, said, "You lost, man." His name was Ryan Mitchell. Caleb didn't know that yet. He learned it later. "Calibration ticket on the East Impact sensor," Caleb said. He didn't adjust his tone. He didn't drop it or sharpen it. He just said the words. "This is a restricted training floor," another one said. Shorter, with a closely trimmed beard and the clipped speech pattern of someone who had spent time in a formal command structure. His name, Caleb would learn, was Daniel Price. "I have clearance," Caleb said. He held up the tablet with the maintenance ticket. Mitchell squinted at it like the ticket itself was suspicious. "Gerald send you up." "That's right." Mitchell exchanged a look with Price, then with the 3 others, Torres, Kaufman, Webb. A silent conversation conducted in the vocabulary of men who had worked together long enough to talk without speaking. Then Mitchell smiled. It was not a welcoming smile. "Sure," he said. "Come on in. Just try not to break anything else while you're fixing the thing you were sent to fix." One of the others, Torres, with a laugh that had some genuine entertainment in it and some cruelty, added, "Yeah, and watch your step. Floor's clean. Wouldn't want you to track something in." Caleb walked toward the east wall. He kept his face still, his breathing even, his pace unchanged. This was not the first time. It was not the 10th time. It was not even the 100th time that a room full of men had looked at him and decided that what he was carrying was a ceiling and not a choice. He thought briefly about Gerald telling him he was the best worker he'd managed in 20 years. He thought about Maya asking whether people treated him differently because of how he looked. He thought about the answer he had given her, "Sometimes. But it doesn't change what I know about myself." He knelt in front of the sensor hang and opened his toolbox. Behind him, the 5 men continued their conversation. They weren't training. They were waiting. Waiting he would realize shortly for someone. A visiting party. A delegation. He had heard something about government visitors. He hadn't paid close attention. "You know what gets me?" Mitchell was saying loud enough to be performing rather than conversing, "is how they just send anyone up here. This is a secure facility. We're about to have federal guests, and they send the janitor." Maintenance, since one of the others corrected with a tone that made the distinction a mockery rather than a defense. "Right," Mitchell said. "My apologies. The maintenance guy." Laughter. Caleb continued working. The sensor housing had a calibration drift, a common issue with the model they were using, one he had seen before in similar installations. He pulled out his diagnostic tool and connected it to the terminal. "Think he even knows what he's doing?" Torres said. "He's got a tablet," Price offered dryly. "The tablet knows what it's doing." More laughter. Caleb made a small adjustment to the calibration dial, ran the diagnostic again. The reading shifted toward the correct range. I was almost done. He was 30 seconds away from finishing the ticket, packing his tools, and walking out of this room without having said another word when the door at the far end opened, and three things happened at once. The first was that a woman walked in. She was in her early 40s, with the kind of composed authority that comes not from effort, but from having made 1,000 decisions under pressure and simply arrived at certainty as a natural destination. She was wearing a dark blazer over a gray shirt, and she moved through the room the way people move when rooms belong to them. Caleb noticed her the way he noticed all variables in a space-registered file noted. CEO Olivia Whitmore. He didn't know her name yet, but he understood immediately what she was. The second thing that happened was that another man entered behind her, older, military bearing, the particular stillness of someone who had spent years being the most prepared person in any room he entered. He was perhaps 65, gray at the temples, decorated clearly though not in uniform. Caleb registered him the way he had registered the 5 guards, but differently. He registered him the way you register something familiar. He didn't look at the man for more than a second. He returned to his calibration dial. The third thing that happened was that Ryan Mitchell, seeing the CEO enter the room, decided to perform. "Perfect timing," Mitchell said, turning toward Olivia with a practiced ease that suggested he believed he made a strong impression on people who mattered. "We were just about to run the demonstration drill before the delegation arrives." Olivia glanced toward Caleb, then back to Mitchell. "I see maintenance is already here." "He's almost done," Mitchell said, dismissing the category rather than the person. Olivia looked at Caleb directly. "Sir, I'm sorry we're in your way. How much longer do you need?" 2 minutes, Caleb said. She nodded like that was a reasonable and professional answer, because it was. Mitchell, apparently deciding that the CEO's attention needed to be maintained in his direction, said, "Ma'am, we're ready to demonstrate the team's response protocol whenever you are. We were actually just talking about how the drill might be more impressive if it involved an uncontrolled variable." He glanced at Caleb. The suggestion hung in the air. Caleb felt it before anyone said it out loud. He finished his adjustment, disconnected his diagnostic tool, and began replacing the sensor housing panel. "What kind of uncontrolled variable?" Olivia asked. "Well," Mitchell said, and now he was smiling, and the smile had all of the warmth of a door with no handle on the inside. "We've got a civilian in the room, someone untrained, someone who isn't expecting anything. If we can demonstrate response protocol against a real unknown, it's a more honest test than running a rehearsed scenario." Silence. Caleb closed the panel, picked up his screwdriver, placed it in the toolbox. "I don't think that's appropriate," Olivia said carefully. "It's a training exercise," Mitchell said, still performing, still pitching. "Nothing that would actually—" "I'm done," Caleb said. He stood up, picked up his toolbox, turned toward the door. "Hey," Mitchell said. Caleb stopped, not because of the tone, not because he was startled or intimidated. He stopped because something in him, some old, well-calibrated internal instrument, told him that this moment was about to hinge. He turned around. Mitchell had picked up a training weapon from the equipment rack along the wall. Blue rubber, blunt, the kind used in demonstrations to simulate real threat scenarios. He was holding it loosely, the way you hold something when you want people to think you're not quite serious, but you actually are. "Just humor us," Mitchell said. "1 second. We'll show you how we respond to an unknown civilian contact. You don't have to do anything, just be surprised." Caleb looked at the training weapon. He looked at the 5 men arrayed in a loose formation around Mitchell, already shifting into position, because this was what their bodies did. When a demonstration was about to happen, they adjusted, they prepared, they anticipated. He looked at Olivia, whose expression had tightened. She was about to say something. He could see it. He looked at the older man standing slightly to her left, who had gone very still in a way that had nothing to do with the stillness of people who are simply watching. The older man was watching Caleb. Not with curiosity, not with amusement, with the precise, unreadable attention of someone who is seeing something they recognize. Caleb looked back at Mitchell. "Put it down," Caleb said, quietly, with exactly the same weight as every other thing he had said in this room. Mitchell laughed. "Come on, man. It's a training." He moved. The weapon came up in a high arc, not fast, not really, not compared to what Caleb's internal clock registered as fast. And Mitchell was smiling, because he thought this was going to be funny, thought the maintenance guy was going to flinch or stumble backward, thought this was going to be the kind of story they told later to make people laugh. It lasted 8 seconds. 8 seconds is a long time if you know what you're doing with it. It is no time at all if you don't. What Caleb did in those 8 seconds was not complicated. It was not dramatic. It was not, from the perspective of the man doing it, emotional at all. It was simply correct. Each movement was the precise minimum required to redirect, neutralize, and ground. No extra force. No punishing weight. No signals sent through impact that might injure or humiliate beyond the requirements of the moment. Mitchell went first. The weapon removed from his hand before he finished the arc. His wrist redirected in the same motion. His center of gravity compromised by the time he registered that the weapon was no longer in his grip. He went down without ever understanding quite how he got there. Price came in from the left. Clean response, well-trained, fast. Not fast enough. Caleb used Price's own momentum, absorbed it, redirected it, and Price found the floor beside Mitchell, with a sound like a book being set down on a table controlled final. Torres came from behind. That one required a pivot. A quarter turn, a slip and arm bar that didn't lock it guided. Torres went horizontal without any part of his body taking damage. It would remember tomorrow. Kaufman and Webb came together. Trained to move as a unit. A unit is predictable in different ways than individuals are. Caleb moved through the gap between them, the gap they hadn't closed because they assumed there wasn't one, and they were on the floor within 2 seconds of each other. Then it was over. 5 men on the floor, all of them breathing, all of them intact, all of them staring at the ceiling with the expression of people who have just been asked a question in a language they thought they spoke fluently and discovered they were completely wrong. Caleb stood in the center of the room. He was not breathing hard. He was holding the training weapon that had started all of this, holding it at his side loosely, the way you hold something you picked up off the street and haven't decided what to do with yet. He placed it on the equipment rack. He picked up his toolbox. He looked at no one in particular. "Calibration's done," he said. "Sensor should hold. If you see a drift reading come back in the next 72 hours, the housing might need replacement." He walked toward the door. The room was absolutely silent. I was almost through it when the older man's voice, quiet, even carrying the specific weight of someone who had spoken into silence before and knew exactly what it did, said one word. One word that stopped Caleb the way the training weapon and the 5 guards and all the laughter hadn't. The man said his name, not "Hey" and not "Sir" and not "You." He said Brooks. Caleb stopped. His hand was on the doorframe. He did not turn around immediately. He took one breath, slow, controlled. Then he turned. The older man was looking at him with an expression that contained no surprise at all. "I wasn't sure it was you," the man said. "Until just now." Caleb looked at him for a long moment. 5 trained security professionals were still on the floor around them. The CEO of the company was standing 6 feet away with her hand at her mouth. Nobody in the room was making any noise. "General Cole," Caleb said. His voice was completely flat. Nathan Cole, because that was who he was, and Caleb had known it the moment the man went still, had known it, and filed it, and deliberately not looked at it the way you sometimes don't look directly at a thing, because looking at it will make it real, nodded once. "We need to talk," the general said. Caleb looked down at his toolbox. He thought about Maya, about the school bus at 3:20, about the apartment on Garfield Street, and the coffee at 5:45, and the small, deliberate, chosen life he had built around the one thing in his life that had never asked anything from him except to be present. He thought about what it meant that Nathan Cole was standing in this room, in this building, on this day. He thought about the mission that had ended with 3 of his people in the ground. He thought about a name he had spent 4 years trying to find. He thought about the fact that whatever Nathan Cole was doing inside Whitmore Technologies, it was not a coincidence. None of this was a coincidence. "Yeah," Caleb said quietly. He set his toolbox down. "We do." On the floor, Ryan Mitchell was sitting up slowly, one hand pressed to the back of his head, his face carrying an expression that had nothing left of mockery in it. "I was looking at Caleb Brooks, the way you look at something you completely misread. The way you look at a door you thought was a wall." Nobody moved for a long moment. That was the thing about certain kinds of silence. They didn't just sit in the air. They pressed against it. They had weight and temperature, and a particular quality that told everyone in the room, without anyone having to say a word, that something had shifted in a way that couldn't be unshifted. Ryan Mitchell was still on the floor. He had one knee up and one hand pressed flat against the training mat, and he was looking at Caleb Brooks with the specific expression of a man whose internal architecture has just been rearranged without his permission. It wasn't fear exactly, men. Like Mitchell didn't land on fear quickly, their training moved them past it too fast, but it was something adjacent to fear. It was the feeling of standing on ground you thought was solid, and discovering that the solid thing was a door, and the door was open, and you had no idea what was underneath it. Daniel Price was sitting up on his side of the room, one forearm resting across his knee, his eyes moving between Caleb and General Cole in the careful, methodical way of someone who is rapidly reconstructing a situation from scratch. Torres hadn't tried to get up yet. He was lying on his back staring at the ceiling, and his expression was not anger or embarrassment. It was pure, uncomplicated bewilderment, the kind that comes when your body does something your mind didn't authorize, and you have to spend a few seconds just taking inventory. Kaufman and Webb were up on their elbows exchanging a look that communicated nothing clearly, because neither one of them had anything clear to communicate. Olivia Whitmore had not moved from the spot where she'd been standing when it happened. Her hand was still near her mouth, but no longer touching it. Her eyes were on Caleb. Not on the guards. On Caleb. She was doing the thing that careful, intelligent people do when they witness something they don't fully understand. She was watching the thing that wasn't doing what she expected, rather than the things that were. General Nathan Cole stood with his hands at his sides. His face gave away exactly as much as he intended it to give away, which was nothing and everything at the same time. He was looking at Caleb with the settled, unsurprised attention of someone who has waited a long time for a specific bus and is not shocked to see it finally arriving. Caleb stood near the equipment rack where he'd set down the training weapon. His toolbox was on the floor beside his left foot. His right hand was open at his side. He was looking at Cole the way you look at a chapter of your life that you closed and locked and slid under a heavy piece of furniture. And then one day you come home, and it's sitting in the middle of the room, open to a page you remember. It was Olivia who broke the silence first, because she was among everything else. She was a person who had built a company from 40 employees to 400, by understanding that the longer a critical moment goes unaddressed, the more it costs you. "Can someone," she said very carefully, "tell me what just happened?" Nobody answered immediately. "I'll tell you what happened," Mitchell said. He was getting to his feet now slowly with the controlled movements of a man who is refusing to let his body communicate anything that his face is trying to suppress. He straightened up, adjusted his shirt. And then he did something that Caleb hadn't expected. He laughed. Not the performing laugh from earlier. Something shorter and realer, and a little bit rueful. "What happened is that we were idiots," Mitchell said. "Specifically, I was an idiot." Price looked at him. "I initiated a training contact with an untrained civilian," Mitchell continued, "and the untrained civilian put all 5 of us on the ground in about 8 seconds. He paused. Which means one of 2 things. Either we are catastrophically bad at our jobs, or that man is not an untrained civilian." He looked at Caleb. "Which is it?" he said. And this time the tone was different. The performance was gone. What was left was something closer to a real question from a man who had spent his professional life being good at things and had just encountered evidence that his calibration was off. Caleb looked at him for a moment. "You left your left side open every time you committed forward," Caleb said. "Not just now. I watched you warm up when I was working on the sensor. You favor your right and you know it, and because you know it, you overcompensate on your right side and forget that the overcompensation creates a pattern. Anyone patient enough to watch for 3 minutes would have seen it." Mitchell stared at him. "That's a flaw," Caleb said. "It's fixable. But someone should have told you before now." The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Less pressure. More space. General Cole said, "Olivia, could I ask for the room just for a few minutes?" Olivia looked at him. She had known Nathan Cole for 7 years. He had been one of the government liaisons on the original contract that put Whitmore Technologies on the map. She trusted him the way you trust people you've watched make hard decisions under conditions that don't allow for mistakes. "Of course," she said. Then she looked at Caleb. "Mr. Brooks, I want to speak with you afterward. Directly." "Yes, ma'am," Caleb said. She held his gaze for 1 second longer than necessary, and in that second, something passed between them that wasn't exactly communication, but was something like it, a mutual acknowledgement that the situation they were both standing in was significantly more complicated than either of them had understood 30 minutes ago. Then she turned and walked out, and the 5 guards followed her. Mitchell last, with one more look at Caleb that had nothing dismissive left in it. The door closed. Cole and Caleb were alone. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Cole moved to the bench along the near wall and sat down, settling into it with the careful deliberateness of a man who has learned not to put his full weight on things quickly. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. "You look good," Cole said. "Considering." "Considering what?" Caleb said. "Considering that you've spent 4 years carrying a toolbox and pretending to be someone you're not." Caleb picked up his toolbox and moved it to the bench beside Cole, not sitting down yet, just placing it there. "I'm not pretending to be anyone. I am the maintenance tech on floors 3 through 7. I fixed a calibration sensor today. That's a real job I actually did." "Caleb, don't." "I'm not here to—" "I said don't." Caleb's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It simply landed with a finality that Cole, who had spent 40 years in rooms where people said things with authority, received without resistance. He stopped talking. Caleb sat down on the bench, not next to Cole, but at a slight angle, elbows on his knees, mirroring the older man's posture without intending to. Old habits. Old geometries of conversation from a world he'd left behind. "How did you find me?" Caleb said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, shaped like a question, and Cole understood the difference. "I didn't," Cole said. "I had no idea you were here. I'm here because of the Whitmore contract. There's a new phase of the security protocol review, and I'm part of the delegation doing the assessment." He paused. "I walked into that room and saw a man in a maintenance uniform standing next to the east wall, and I thought I recognized the posture. And then Mitchell did what he did, and I watched how you moved, and I knew." "Nobody else would know," Caleb said. "Nobody else trained you," Cole said. Another silence. This one was warmer. The way silences between people who once knew each other very well can sometimes be full of things that don't need to be said, but still fill the space. "How's your daughter?" Cole asked. "She's 8, Caleb said. "She's good. She asks hard questions." "Good questions or hard questions?" "Both," Caleb said. "Usually the same question." Cole almost smiled. "She sounds like her father." Caleb didn't respond to that. He leaned back, looked at the ceiling for a moment, then brought his eyes back level. "Why are you really here, Nathan?" Cole said. "I told you. You told me the official version. Give me the real one." Cole was quiet. Then, "There's something wrong inside this company." Caleb let that sit. "I started noticing it 8 months ago," Cole continued. "Anomalies in the data reporting on the government security systems that Whitmore manages. Small things. The kind of small things that people who aren't looking closely miss. But I was looking closely, and I didn't like what I was seeing." He paused. "And then 6 weeks ago, something came across my desk that I almost didn't connect. A data leak. Classified security architecture. Small amount, but from a source that should have been locked down so tight that leaking anything from it should have been impossible. And you traced it to Whitmore," Caleb said. "I traced it to the building," Cole said. "To the network infrastructure that Whitmore maintains for the government systems housed on the lower floors. But I couldn't get more specific than that without tipping off whoever was responsible." "So you came for the contract review?" "I came for the contract review," Cole confirmed. "Which is a real thing, and I really am here for it. But I also came to look around." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I walked into a room and watched a man who used to be one of the finest defensive specialists I ever worked with put 5 trained security professionals on the floor without breaking a sweat," Cole said. "And that man is now working maintenance on floors 3 through 7, and that strikes me as a significant misallocation of resources." "That's not your call to make." "No," Cole said. "It isn't. I know that. I made a choice, Nathan. I know you did. I made a choice because I was the last one standing after a mission that should never have happened the way it happened, and someone was responsible for that, and I couldn't find out who, and I was done. I was done, and I needed to be someone's father, and I needed that to be enough." Caleb's voice hadn't changed in volume or pitch, but something in it had shifted slightly, a barely perceptible tightening, like a cable under tension that you can't see move but can hear if you know what the sound means. "And for 4 years it has been enough. It has been exactly enough." Cole looked at him. "Caleb." "What?" "The man who was responsible for what happened to your team," Cole said very carefully, very quietly. "I think I know who it is." Caleb went very still. "And I think he's inside this building." The name Cole gave him was one that Caleb had heard before. Not in the context, Cole was suggesting, not directly, not with evidence attached. But the name had appeared on the periphery of things Caleb had tried to investigate in the year before he stopped investigating. It had surfaced in places where it shouldn't have been, and been absent from places where it should have appeared, and Caleb had noted it and flagged it, and eventually set it aside, because he had been running out of road, and he had a daughter who needed him to come home. Victor Langford, Whitmore's security director. Caleb sat with the name for a long moment after Cole said it. He didn't react outwardly. He sat the way he had learned to sit in rooms where reacting outwardly was the thing that got you killed. "That's a significant accusation," Caleb said. "I know." "What do you have?" "Not enough," Cole said. "Not yet. I have patterns. I have access records that don't track with official authorization. I have a profile that fits and a timeline that almost fits. And 6 weeks of watching someone move through this organization, the way guilty people move carefully, casually, too carefully." He spread his hands. "If I had enough, I wouldn't be sitting in a training room in Cincinnati talking to a maintenance tech." "Don't call me that right now," Caleb said. Not angrily, just precisely. "I'm sorry," Cole said, and he meant it. Caleb stood up, walked to the center of the room. Stood where he'd stood 8 minutes ago when 5 men were on the floor around him, looking at the space they'd occupied, thinking about something that wasn't the room. "Langford," he said. "He's been here since the beginning of the company's government work. I was brought in 4.5 years ago," Cole said. "About 6 months after the program that your team was part of was officially closed. After the mission." "After the mission." Caleb looked at his hands. Then he looked at the equipment rack where the training weapon was sitting. "If Langford is responsible for what happened to my team," he said slowly, "he didn't just make a mistake. He didn't just fail to protect information. He actively moved it. He sold something, and 3 of my people died because of it." Yes, Cole said. And now he's been inside this company for 4.5 years. Yes. Building what? Caleb said. That's what I don't know, Cole said. But given what he's already moved and the systems he has access to, government security, architecture, infrastructure, protocols, protective frameworks for a dozen federal programs. Whatever he's been building, it's significant. And I think we're getting close to whatever the end point is. Caleb turned around. He said. Cole looked at him steadily. That's your call. I told you I know it's your call. But I'm telling you what I know, and I'm telling you that I need someone inside this building who understands what we're looking at. Someone who knows how these systems work, who knows how protection architecture can be compromised, and who can move through this facility without raising red flags. He paused. You've been here for months. You know the building. You have access to floors that his security people don't give a second glance to. Because I'm the maintenance guy, Caleb said flatly. Yes, Cole said. Caleb looked at him for a long moment. That's incredibly cynical, Caleb said. I know, Cole said. You want to use the fact that people in this building look at me and see someone invisible. I want to use the fact that you are not invisible, Cole said. The people who underestimate you because of what you're wearing are making their mistake, not yours. You're not invisible. You're exactly the opposite. You're the clearest-eyed person in this building, and you have been since you got here, and you know this facility in ways that no one on Langford's team does. Caleb breathed in, breathed out. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the school bus at 3:20. I thought about 3 names: Marcus Webb, Davion Cole, Aisha Reyes. 3 people he had worked beside, and trained beside, and trusted beside, whose names he said in his head, on certain nights when the apartment was quiet and the old weight came back. 3 people who had trusted someone with their location, and the someone had made sure that trust was lethal. He thought about what it would mean to walk away from this room and go back to floor 3 and keep working. I thought about what it would mean if he did that, and Langford finished whatever he was building and more people got hurt, and Caleb spent the rest of his life knowing he'd been 30 feet away from the answer and chosen not to look. I'm not coming back in, he said. Cole nodded. I'm not picking up a case file and becoming something I stopped being, Caleb continued. I'm not leaving my daughter. I'm not doing anything that puts her in a situation where she's waiting for a father who doesn't come home. I understand, Cole said. That's not what I'm asking. What are you asking? I'm asking you to do what you're already doing, Cole said. Keep coming to work, keep doing your job. But while you're doing it, look at what I've been looking at and tell me what you see. You've been inside this building for 8 months. You've already seen things without knowing what you were seeing. I just need you to look with different eyes. Caleb was quiet for a long time. The kind of long that makes the air feel thick. If I find something, he said, we do it right. We document it, we source it, we hand it to people who can act on it through proper channels. I'm not handling Victor Langford personally. I'm not putting myself in a position where the outcome depends on what I decide to do with my hands. That's the only way I'd want it done, Cole said. And my daughter doesn't know anything about this. Of course not. And the moment I believe this is putting her at risk, you walk, Cole said. No questions, no obligations, you walk. Caleb picked up his toolbox. He looked at Cole for one more moment. The way you look at someone you've trusted before and are choosing to trust again, with all the weight that comes from knowing exactly what that trust has cost in the past. Send me what you have, he said. The access records, the anomalies, whatever gave you the pattern. How do I reach you? Same way anyone reaches the maintenance department, Caleb said. File a ticket. The next 72 hours were quiet in the way that things are quiet just before they stop being quiet. Caleb went home that evening and picked Maya up from his neighbor Mrs. Okafor's apartment, where she'd been doing homework at the kitchen table and having opinions about Mrs. Okafor's television programming choices. He made dinner pasta with the turkey meat sauce that Maya claimed was her favorite food of all time and would periodically renegotiate to include extra cheese. He helped her with a math worksheet about fractions. He read with her for 20 minutes before bed. He did not say anything about the training room on floor 17. He did not say anything about Nathan Cole. He sat on the edge of her bed after she fell asleep the way he sometimes did, and listened to her breathe. The same even rhythm as that morning when the day hadn't started yet, and the apartment was dark, and everything was still contained. He thought about what Cole had said. He thought about Victor Langford. He thought about the fact that the decision he had just made in that training room, the decision to open his eyes again, to look at something he had been careful not to look at for 4 years, was the kind of decision that doesn't come with a guarantee. The kind that can be right and still cost you something. He stayed on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then he went to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, and opened his work tablet. He found the first thing in 40 minutes. It wasn't in the files Cole sent him. Those arrived the next morning through a secure channel that Cole had clearly set up in advance, which told Caleb that the general had come to Cincinnati already believing that this conversation was going to happen, which was a fact he held aside for later examination. The first thing Caleb found himself. He found it in the maintenance logs, specifically in the access timestamp records for the HVAC control system on floor 14. Floor 14 was where the secure server infrastructure lived, the rack systems that housed the government security data that Whitmore managed under their federal contract. Caleb had been on 14 once 6 months ago to address a cooling anomaly in the server room. He had been there for 40 minutes and had been escorted by 2 of Langford's security people the entire time and had not been permitted to touch anything except the specific cooling unit he'd been dispatched to service. The access records were part of the building management system, not security, not corporate data. Just the maintenance backbone that tracked environmental conditions, equipment status and entry logs for every room in the building that had controlled access. Looking at the logs for the past 3 months, Caleb noticed something. The HVAC control node for floor 14 was being accessed remotely through a valid internal terminal address at irregular hours. 2 in the morning, 4:15. Once at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Environmental adjustments. Small ones. Temperature changes of 1 or 2 degrees. Humidity shifts. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger an alert. But the timing was wrong. Server rooms maintained strict climate controls on automated systems. The automated system made micro adjustments continuously without requiring human input. There was no operational reason for a human operator to be making manual overrides at 2 in the morning, unless something had gone wrong, and if something had gone wrong, it would have generated an alert ticket through the maintenance system. No alert tickets had been generated. Someone was accessing the HVAC node for a different reason. Caleb thought about it for a while. He thought about what you could do with physical access to an HVAC control system adjacent to a secure server room. The direct answer was maintain equipment. The less direct answer involved the relationship between climate controls and the physical behavior of electronic systems under stress. And the answer that required you to think about it sideways from the angle of someone who understood both facility infrastructure and data security was that a carefully managed temperature fluctuation in a server environment, not enough to trigger automated alerts, just enough to create brief processing anomalies at predictable intervals, could be used as a timing mechanism. A clock. Someone was using the building's environmental systems as a clock. He didn't know yet what the clock was counting down to. He went to bed at 1:15, got up at 5:45, made the coffee, started the day. The files from Cole arrived at 7:03 a.m. through a secure message on a phone that appeared in his work locker with a note that said simply, "Replacement device per IT security audit. Your old device will be recycled. Gerald." Gerald had no idea what he had delivered. Caleb read through Cole's files on his lunch break, sitting on the overturned bucket in the 5th floor service corridor. He ate his sandwich and read, and the more he read, the more clearly he could see the shape of what Cole had been looking at. The access anomalies Cole had flagged were elegant. That was the word that kept coming back to him as he read. Elegant. Whoever had built this had built it to be invisible, not to security experts necessarily, because security experts who were looking closely would eventually see it. But to the casual audit, to the quarterly review, to the automated systems that were programmed to look for known threat signatures, this was invisible. Because it used known legitimate access points. It used authorized personnel credentials. It used the infrastructure itself as camouflage. Caleb thought about his 4 years in this building. He thought about the things he had seen that he hadn't paid attention to because they weren't his job to pay attention to. I thought about the evening 6 months ago when he'd been finishing a shift on floor 12 and he had passed Victor Langford in the corridor outside the server room, and Langford had given him the look that the people in this building often gave him, the brief dismissive registering of a uniform rather than a person, and Caleb had kept walking and thought nothing of it. He thought about it now. He thought about it differently now. On the second day after the training room incident, something changed in the dynamic on floor 17. Ryan Mitchell came and found him. Not up on 17, Caleb didn't have any tickets for 17 that day. Mitchell tracked him down on floor 4, which required either looking up his schedule in the building management system or asking Gerald, and Caleb noted that level of effort without commenting on it. "Brooks," Mitchell said. Caleb was replacing a lighting panel. He didn't stop working. "Mitchell." "I wanted to." Mitchell stopped, started again. "Yesterday was." "You don't have to do this," Caleb said. "I think I do," Mitchell said. Caleb finished connecting the wire harness before he turned around. He looked at Mitchell. The man was in his security uniform, now not training gear, the actual day-use security badge and company blazer. He looked more professional, and somehow less certain at the same time, which Caleb had observed was often what happened when you took people out of the context where they performed their competence and put them in a context where they had to simply be themselves. "I was out of line," Mitchell said. "The way I talked to you, the way I set up that whatever that was, it was out of line and it was stupid and it was wrong." Caleb looked at him. "Is there a version of this where you actually tell me what was going on in your head?" Caleb said. "Not the apology. The honest thing." Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then, "I saw a guy in a uniform that told me something, and I decided that was enough information. I didn't ask any questions, I just decided. And then I put you on the floor," Caleb said. "And then you put me on the floor," Mitchell said. "In 8 seconds. "Closer to 7, Caleb said. Mitchell almost laughed. It had a different quality than his laugh from the day before. "Who are you?" he said. "Honestly." "I'm the maintenance tech on 3 through 7, Caleb said. "Today I'm replacing this lighting panel. Tomorrow I've got a plumbing call on 6. Mitchell looked at him for a long moment. "That's not all you are." "No," Caleb agreed. "But it's what I'm doing." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He turned to go, then stopped. "For what it's worth, you said I leave my left side open." "You do." "My last training evaluation didn't flag it." "Then whoever did your last evaluation wasn't watching you long enough," Caleb said. Mitchell turned that over. "Would you, I know this is a strange ask, but..." "What?" "Would you be willing to take a look at our training program, not officially, not as any kind of formal thing, just..." "No," Caleb said. Mitchell stopped. "Not right now," Caleb added. "Ask me again in a few weeks." Mitchell didn't know what that meant, but something in the way Caleb said it made him decide not to push. He nodded. "All right," he said. "All right." He walked back toward the elevator. Caleb watched him go. Then he turned back to the lighting panel and thought about what Cole had sent him and what he had found in the HVAC logs and the shape of something he was beginning to see that he didn't have a name for yet. He thought about Victor Langford. He thought about what the clock was counting down to. He thought about the fact that whatever it was, based on the frequency of the access intervals and the pattern in the data, it was close. He picked up his screwdriver and finished the panel, and then he started thinking about the fact that 2 days ago he had used his access card to reach floor 17. Standard maintenance call, normal procedure logged and timestamped in the system. And that morning, Gerald had left a note on the maintenance board asking him to clarify the timestamps on 2 of his recent access logs because there appeared to be a discrepancy. Caleb had checked those logs. His card had been used to access floor 14 on a night he had been home reading to his daughter. Someone had his credentials. Someone was using them. And the thing that settled into the center of his chest when he understood that cold and dense and specific as a stone was not panic. It was recognition. This was how it had started before. Someone building a frame around a person who wouldn't see it coming. The only difference this time was that Caleb Brooks saw it coming, and he was already looking back. The discrepancy in the access logs was not an accident. Caleb understood that by the end of the day he found it, and he understood it more completely by the following morning when he had spent the night not sleeping but lying still in the dark with his eyes open, running through the architecture of what he was looking at. The way you run your hands along a wall in the dark, slowly, carefully feeling for the shape of things you can't yet see. Someone had duplicated his credentials, not stolen the physical card. It was still on the lanyard around his neck, still functional, still scanning correctly at every door he used it on. This was cleaner than that. Someone had cloned the signal, lifted the access code from the card's transmission, replicated it, and used it to walk through a door that Caleb was supposed to have walked through on a night when Caleb was home on Garfield Street, cutting the crusts off a turkey sandwich, and arguing gently with his daughter about whether fractions were actually useful in real life. Maya's position, no. Caleb's position, you'd be surprised. He had been in that kitchen, in that argument, in that life he had chosen. And somewhere in this building, a door had opened with his name attached to it, and something had happened on a floor 14 that he had not done and could not account for. The elegant thing about it, he thought, was the timing. Whoever had planned this had waited. They hadn't used his credentials immediately. They had waited until the moment created maximum leverage, until there was a government delegation in the building, until the security review was underway, until using Caleb's access card for something unauthorized would land in a context where the explanation, "I was home with my daughter," was exactly the kind of thing that sounded like what a guilty man would say. The frame was clean. He'd seen cleaner, but not many. He sent Cole a message through the secure phone that morning. 3 words. "They're moving fast." Cole's response came back in under 4 minutes, which told Caleb that the general was not sleeping much either. "I know." "How exposed are you?" Caleb thought about that. He wrote back, "Enough that I need to move first." I went to Olivia Whitmore's office at 8:15 a.m. He hadn't scheduled it. He walked up to her assistant, a young woman named Patricia, who wore reading glasses pushed up on her head like a headband and had the calibrated efficiency of someone who controlled access to a busy person and took that responsibility seriously, and said, "I need 5 minutes with Ms. Whitmore. It's about a security matter involving my maintenance credentials." Patricia looked at him over her glasses. She looked at his coveralls. She looked at the tablet in his hand. And then, to her considerable credit, she looked at his face, and something in what she found there made her pick up her desk phone without argument. "Ms. Whitmore, I have Mr. Brooks from Facilities Maintenance here. He says it's a security matter." A pause. "Yes, ma'am." She set the phone down and looked at Caleb. "She'll see you now." Caleb nodded. "Thank you." Olivia's office occupied the corner of the 15th floor, with windows on 2 sides that let in the kind of morning light that made everything look more organized than it was. She was standing when he entered, not behind her desk, but in front of it, which told him she had been expecting something. Not necessarily him specifically, but something, and had positioned herself accordingly. "Mr. Brooks," she said. "Ms. Whitmore," he said. "I'll be direct. Someone has cloned my access credentials and used them to enter the restricted server infrastructure on floor 14. I don't know exactly what they were doing on 14, or for how long this has been happening. What I do know is that I'm about to be the most convenient person to blame for it." Olivia was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. He counted them because he had learned a long time ago that how long someone takes to respond to a surprise tells you a significant amount about how they process information under pressure. 3 seconds was good. It meant she was thinking before reacting. "Sit down," she said. "I'd rather stand," he said. Not defiance, just information. She accepted it. "When did you find this?" "Yesterday. I noticed a discrepancy in my timestamp log when Gerald flagged it on the maintenance board. I cross-referenced it against the building access records I have visibility into through the facilities management system." My card was used to enter the floor. 14 server corridor at 2:14 a.m. last Tuesday. I was not in this building at 2:14 a.m. last Tuesday. Can you prove that? My neighbor Mrs. Okafor has a doorbell camera that timestamps every entry in our building. I can get you the footage of me arriving home at 6:47 p.m. and not leaving until the following morning. He paused. That's not the important thing. What's the important thing? The important thing is that whoever did this planned it carefully. They didn't do it randomly. They chose my credentials specifically. And the reason they chose mine is the same reason that room full of guards on 17 chose me to embarrass 2 days ago, because in a building full of people who have learned to look past me, I'm the most useful person to blame for something. Olivia looked at him steadily. You think someone inside this company is using you as a decoy? I think someone inside this company is using the fact that I wear a maintenance uniform to create a story. And I think the story is almost ready to be told. She walked to her desk and picked up her phone. He watched her and waited. I'm going to call Victor, she said. I'd ask you not to, Caleb said. She paused. Victor is my security director. A breach of this magnitude, Ms. Whitmore. He said her name carefully, the way you say something when you need the next sentence to land precisely. Before you make that call, I need to ask you something. The access anomalies that have been happening in your building's infrastructure over the past several months, has Victor Langford been the person leading the internal security review of those anomalies? Olivia was very still. Yes. Has he reported anything significant to you? A beat. No. He said the anomalies were minor, calibration issues, environmental variables. Someone has been accessing the HVAC control node for the floor 14 server room at irregular hours and making manual environmental adjustments, Caleb said. Small ones. Nothing that triggers your alert system, but patterned, deliberate, and the access logs for those adjustments trace back to credentials that belong to a member of your security department. Olivia's expression changed. It changed the way the surface of water changes when something moves beneath it. You don't see the thing, but you see the effect clearly enough. Not mine, Caleb said. Someone on your security team. He watched her understand it. He watched her reach the edge of it, the place where the pieces assembled into a shape she didn't want to be looking at. And he watched her stand there at that edge, with the composure of someone who has built something and is not going to let the discovery that something is wrong inside it break her before she understands what she's dealing with. Tell me everything, she said. So he did. He told her about the HVAC access pattern. He told her about the timing intervals, the deliberate temperature adjustments, the absence of maintenance tickets that should have accompanied any legitimate manual override. He told her what he believed someone could use a climate control system adjacent to a server room to accomplish, not the full technical explanation, because she was a CEO, not an infrastructure engineer, and he knew which parts of the information she needed and which parts would only slow down the thing they were doing, but enough. Enough for her to understand the mechanism. He did not tell her about Nathan Cole. Not yet. She listened the way careful people listen, without interrupting, without reacting visibly, with the specific stillness of someone who is absorbing information that they will need to act on accurately and cannot afford to distort through an emotional response before they have the full picture. When he finished, she said, "How long have you known this?" "I've been building it for 48 hours, he said. "Before that, I was looking at pieces I didn't know were pieces." "Why didn't you come to me immediately when you found your credentials had been used?" "Because I needed to understand what I was bringing to you before I brought it," he said. "Walking in here yesterday with half a picture and the wrong frame on it would have given whoever did this exactly what they wanted. A confused, incomplete accusation from the maintenance guy that could be made to look like exactly what it looks like on the surface." She looked at him. "Which is what? An employee trying to get ahead of a situation by pointing in another direction," he said. "I needed enough that you couldn't dismiss it, even if you wanted to." "I wouldn't dismiss it," she said. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, not unkindly. "2 days ago, you walked into your security training room and watched 5 of your senior protection staff laugh at the maintenance worker. You stopped it when it went too far, and I appreciate that. But you didn't stop it before it started. So I think we can both be honest about the fact that the maintenance worker walking into your office with a security concern is not the thing you were most prepared to take seriously today. The room was very quiet. "You're right," she said. And she said it without deflecting, without qualifying, without the particular kind of apology that is actually a self-defense mechanism wearing an apology's clothes. She just said it flat and clear and without ornamentation. "You're right, and I'm sorry." Caleb nodded once. "What do we do?" she said. "We don't touch the access logs," he said. "We don't alert your security team, not all of it, and not any individual member of it, until we know who's involved. We don't change anything that would signal to whoever is doing this that we're looking. And we find out what that clock is counting down to, and we find out before it reaches 0. She looked at him for a long moment. "You said clock. The HVAC access pattern isn't random. The intervals are shortening. Whatever the system is being used to time or synchronize, it's approaching a point of convergence." "How soon?" "Days," he said. "Maybe less." Olivia put both hands flat on her desk. It was a grounding gesture. He had seen people do it before, when they were holding something heavy and needed to redistribute the weight. She stood like that for a moment. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" "Access," he said. "Expanded maintenance access to floors I don't currently service. I need to be able to move through this building at unusual hours without it triggering attention, and I need it documented as a legitimate facilities request, so it doesn't look like anything other than what it says it is. Done. And I need your word that if this goes sideways, if the frame tightens before we can document what's behind it, you'll take my account of events seriously." She looked at him directly. "Mr. Brooks, I watched you disarm 5 trained security professionals in 8 seconds, and then calmly tell the CEO that the calibration sensor was done, and she should call maintenance if it drifted. I don't think seriously is going to be the problem." He almost smiled. "One more thing," he said. "Yes, don't cancel your government delegation meetings. Don't change any scheduled event, any planned access, anything on Langford's calendar or your own. Whoever is running this is watching for disruption. Normal is the most protective thing we have right now." "Understood," she said. He picked up his tablet, turned toward the door. "Mr. Brooks," she said. He looked back. "Why are you doing this?" she said. "You could have reported the credential discrepancy through normal channels and let the security department handle it. You could have documented it and walked away and let whatever is going to happen happen. Why are you in my office at 8:15 in the morning taking this on?" He thought about it. He thought about Marcus Webb and Davion Cole and Aisha Reyes. I thought about the years he had spent believing that the truth was somewhere and had simply decided to stop looking. He thought about his daughter asking whether it made him sad when people treated him differently, and about the answer he had given her, and about whether he was living it. "Because I can see it," he said. "And if you can see something that's going to hurt people, and you choose not to look at it, that's not peace. That's just a different kind of damage." He walked out. He found Cole that afternoon in the corridor outside the delegation briefing room on 15, pretending to review a document on his tablet with the practiced inattention of a man who is paying extremely close attention to everything around him. Caleb walked past him without stopping. Quietly, not looking up from his own work tablet, he said, "The CEO is informed. Partial picture enough to work with. I need what you have on Langford's external contacts." Cole, equally quiet, equally not looking up. "Encrypted packet, same channel as before. It'll be there by 7 tonight. Anything new on your end?" The delegation schedule was adjusted this morning. An additional technical briefing was added to tomorrow's agenda, focused on the protective architecture for the Eastern Corridor federal systems. A pause. "It wasn't on the original brief. Langford proposed it." Caleb kept walking. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. An additional briefing, proposed by Langford, focused on the specific systems that the HVAC access pattern suggested were the target. Added to the schedule on the same day that Caleb had gone to Olivia's office. Either Langford didn't know they were looking, or Langford knew they were looking and had decided it didn't matter because whatever was going to happen was close enough that it couldn't be stopped now. Caleb thought about which of those was more dangerous. He decided they both were for different reasons and moved on. I was on floor 6 at 3:10 p.m., finishing a plumbing call in the men's room when Ryan Mitchell appeared in the doorway. Caleb had been seeing Mitchell peripherally for the past 2 days. The man had a new way of moving through the building's shared spaces that Caleb noted without commenting on. He gave way where before he would have expected to be given way to. He made brief, real eye contact where before his gaze had passed over people in maintenance uniforms, the way it passed over furniture. These were small things. But small things done consistently were the only evidence of real change that Caleb had ever trusted. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Mitchell said. "I'm almost done here," Caleb said. He secured the fitting and ran the water for 30 seconds to check the seal. "It's not about training," Mitchell said. "It's about something else." Caleb turned off the water. "Go ahead." Mitchell came inside and let the door close behind him. He lowered his voice. Not secretively, there was no one else in the room, but with the instinct of someone who had decided this was a private conversation and was managing it accordingly. "Something's off on 17, he said. Caleb set down his wrench. "What kind of off?" "Langford restructured the security rotation this morning. He moved 3 of us off our normal posts and reassigned us to escort duty for the delegation, which is normal on days when we have government visitors. I'm not saying it's not normal. But the people he moved us with, he brought in 2 contractors I've never worked with before. No introductions, no background brief. Just showed up, had their credentials cleared through Langford personally, and were placed at the floor 14 corridor as of this afternoon." Caleb looked at him. "I ran the names through our internal contractor database," Mitchell continued. "One of them came back clean. The other one had an ID that looked right at first glance, but the employment history in the system doesn't line up. The dates are off. Whoever entered that record did it recently, and they didn't check whether the timeline was internally consistent." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Why are you bringing this to me?" Mitchell looked at him steadily. "Because Price said the same thing I'm saying, and Torres and we talked it over and we couldn't figure out whether to take it to Langford directly or to go around him, and..." He stopped, started again. "And you put 5 trained security professionals on the floor in 8 seconds and then told us our calibration was off. So..." Caleb looked at the man for a long moment. At the jaw that a few days ago had been set with casual contempt and was now set with something that looked considerably more like focus. "The contractor with the inconsistent record," Caleb said. "First name: Harlan Voss. Physical description." Mitchell gave it. Caleb filed it. "Don't confront him," Caleb said. "Don't change the rotation in a way that makes it look like you're aware something is wrong. Do your escort duty exactly as Langford assigned it. Stay in visual range of Price when you can." Mitchell processed that. "You already know something's happening. I know enough to know that the next 36 hours matter more than anything that's happened in this building in a long time," Caleb said. "And I know that the worst thing we can do right now is move in a way that tells whoever's running this that we've seen them." "Who is running this?" Caleb looked at him. He thought about how much to say. He thought about the weight of giving someone information they're going to have to carry without being able to react to it, and whether Ryan Mitchell was capable of carrying it. He thought Mitchell probably was. What had happened in the training room had not just embarrassed the man. It had reoriented something in him. That kind of reorientation was either real or it wasn't, and in Caleb's experience, the people for whom it was real became useful in exactly these kinds of moments because they had something to prove that wasn't about ego anymore. It was about being what they'd failed to be the first time. "I'll tell you when I can tell you," Caleb said. "Right now, I need you to do your job, do it exactly as assigned, and trust me that I'm working this from my end." "I'm supposed to trust the maintenance guy," Mitchell said. And the way he said it, there was no mockery in it. There was something closer to the plain recognition of an irony that didn't sting because it was true. "Yeah," Caleb said. "You are." Mitchell nodded. Slow. Once. The way men nod when they've made a decision. "Okay," he said. "Okay." The packet from Cole arrived at 6:52 p.m. Caleb read it after Maya went to bed at the kitchen table with the overhead light on and the window dark and the phone screen the only sharp thing in the room. What Cole had compiled on Victor Langford's external contacts was not on its face dramatic. It was the kind of material that looks like a pattern only if you already know what you're looking for and looks like nothing at all if you don't. A consulting arrangement with a European data management firm that had no obvious government connection. A series of phone communications with a number that resolved to a logistics company headquartered in a city that had come up before in Caleb's previous life in contexts that were never fully explained. A financial transfer record, not large, not obvious. The kind of amount that sits below meaningful reporting thresholds by a margin that looked precisely calibrated from an account that Cole had traced 3 steps back to a source that should not have had any connection to Victor Langford at all at that last piece for a long time. The source was a fund that had been used 4 years ago to pay for the operational logistics of the mission that had killed his people. He sat with that for a while. He sat with it the way you sit with something that has the weight of confirmation. Not surprise because some part of him had known or suspected or refused to stop suspecting even when he had told himself he was done. But confirmation has its own weight, separate from surprise. Confirmation means the thing you feared was real is real, and the thing you lost was not lost to chance, but to a choice that someone made, and the someone had a name, and the name was Victor Langford. He set the phone down on the table. He looked at the wall for a while. Then he picked the phone back up because the thing he had learned to do with moments like this, with the weight of confirmation, with the anger that was always there underneath the stillness, was to keep moving. Not because the feeling didn't matter, because the feeling mattered too much to let it steer. He wrote to Cole, "It's him. I have the connection. What's our timeline for documentation?" Cole's response, "Tomorrow." The technical briefing gives him the access point he's been building toward. Whatever the transfer mechanism is, it runs through that briefing. Caleb, I need eyes on 14. My expanded access goes into effect at 6 a.m. Cole, I'll be in the building by 7. Delegation breakfast at 8. Caleb, stay in the delegation track. Don't deviate. If this goes wrong, I need you clean on the other side to finish it. A pause, longer than Cole's previous responses. Then be careful, Caleb. Caleb looked at that for a moment. Then he wrote back, I've got a school bus to meet at 3:20. I'll be careful. He put the phone down, turned off the kitchen light, and went to stand in the doorway of Maya's room. She was on her side, one arm out over the edge of the mattress the way she always slept. Her breathing was even. He stood there for 3 minutes. I thought about what it meant to do this thing he was about to do. Not whether to do it, that question had been answered, and the answer was the name of the fund that had paid for the operation that killed his people and put it in the same sentence as Victor Langford. But what it meant, what it cost, what it would require of the version of himself he had been working to build on Garfield Street. I thought about his daughter's words from 3 weeks ago from a Tuesday dinner when they were talking about a book she was reading at school. Dad, what's the difference between brave and reckless? He had thought about it because he always tried to be honest. Brave is doing the hard thing because the reason is bigger than the fear, he said. Reckless is doing the hard thing and pretending you're not afraid. She had considered this. So brave people are scared too. All the time, he said. That's what makes it brave. He went to bed at 11:40. He lay in the dark and listened to the building settle around him. The particular set of sound an old apartment makes. When the temperature drops and the wood contracts sounds. He had memorized in the 18 months they'd lived there, the same way he'd memorized the maintenance schedules and the layout of floors he hadn't been assigned to yet, and the places in the Meridian building's infrastructure where the seams showed if you knew where to look. He was afraid. He knew he was afraid. He let himself know it because pretending otherwise was reckless, and he had promised his daughter he would be the other thing. At 5:44, 1 minute before his alarm, he opened his eyes. He got up, made the coffee, stood at the window. Cincinnati was still dark. He thought today. I was at the Meridian building's service entrance at 6:03. The expanded access clearance was live in the system. He scanned his card at the floor 14 service corridor, and the door opened, and he noted clinically the low-level novelty of a door opening to him on this floor without an escort. He went in. The server room itself was not his target. He wasn't authorized to enter the server room, and making an attempt to would raise alerts he couldn't afford. What he needed was the adjacent utility corridor, the space between the server room's outer wall and the building's interior structure where the HVAC conduit ran. The space he had a legitimate reason to be in because he was the maintenance tech, and there was a documented anomaly in the environmental controls on this floor that Gerald had logged 3 days ago on the basis of a ticket that Caleb had with care and precision created the paper trail for in advance. He moved through the utility corridor with his toolbox and his tablet and his coveralls, the same way he moved through every space in this building, quietly, purposefully, with the specific cadence of someone who belongs. He found what he was looking for in 11 minutes. It was small, physically small. A secondary data transceiver, no larger than a thick book attached to the backside of the HVAC control terminal. It was not standard equipment. It was also not at first glance obviously non-standard. It was housed in a casing that matched the existing infrastructure closely enough that anyone doing a casual inspection would have moved past it. But Caleb was not doing a casual inspection, and the connection ports on its underside told him what he needed to know. It was a bridge device. It connected the physical HVAC system, which had no direct network interface with the secure servers in the adjacent room, to a signal pathway that the servers did recognize. The climate adjustments that someone had been making manually over the past months had been doing two things: managing the physical environment. Yes, but also through this device, sending timing pulses directly into the server infrastructure, through the one vector that the security architecture hadn't fully accounted for. The building's own environmental system. The one nobody thought of as a threat vector because why would they? It was the HVAC. He photographed it. Every angle, the connection ports, the casing serial numbers, the way it was attached to the terminal. He documented the wiring configuration. He noted the manufacturer's marking on the circuit board visible through the ventilation slot. Then, he pulled out his diagnostic tablet and connected it to the terminal, the same way he would for any legitimate maintenance check, and he looked at what the device had been doing. The pulses were not just timing signals, they were data packets, small ones, fragments, individual pieces that meant nothing alone, that would have looked like environmental noise in any system log, but that assembled over months, over hundreds of separate accesses, accumulated and sequenced into something coherent. Architecture data. Specifically the security architecture for the federal systems on this floor. The protective frameworks, the access protocols, the authentication hierarchies, being moved, piece by piece, over 8 months, through the air conditioning system. Caleb stood in the utility corridor and felt something that was not quite anger and not quite grief, and not entirely either, but was made of both the particular feeling of finally seeing the shape of a thing that has been invisible for years, and understanding that its invisibility was the weapon. He thought about Marcus Webb's voice on the radio 4 years ago, in the last few seconds before the communication went dark. He had the documentation. He had the device. He had the financial connection. He had everything he needed to end this in a way that lasted. And then the lights in the utility corridor went out, and the door behind him clicked, and from somewhere inside the building, a low building-wide tone began. Not an alarm, exactly. Not something with the clear meaning of a fire alert or a security breach. Something more ambiguous than that. Something designed, he thought immediately, to create confusion without triggering the specific automated responses that a known emergency type would produce. And Victor Langford's voice came through the building's internal communication system, smooth and measured, and carrying the particular cadence of a man who has been preparing this sentence for a very long time. Attention all personnel. We have identified a security breach. The individual responsible has been located in the restricted infrastructure corridor on floor 14. All staff, please remain in place while security responds. This is Victor Langford, Director of Security. The situation is under control. Caleb stood in the dark. His toolbox was in his hand. His tablet was in his other hand, with the documentation still open on the screen, and he had the presence of mind in the 3 seconds after the lights went out to do two things. Hit send on the encrypted transmission to the secure channel Cole had given him, pushing every photograph and every log he had just pulled, and then close the screen so its light wouldn't show. In the dark in the corridor, with the door locked behind him, and Langford's voice still echoing in the building's bones, Caleb Brooks stood very still. He was not panicking. He had been in dark corridors before. He had been set up before. And he had learned in the worst possible way what happened when you let someone else write the story of who you were. He was not going to let that happen again. He breathed in, breathed out, and then he started moving. Because the thing about being the maintenance tech on a building for 8 months was that you knew every corridor. You knew every door. You knew which panels opened from the inside and which service passages connected floors that the official building map didn't show connecting, because the official building map was designed for people who lived in the public spaces, and Caleb had spent 8 months in the ones behind them. Victor Langford had made the same mistake as 5 men in a training room. He had looked at the uniform. He hadn't looked at the man inside it, and he had no idea, not yet, what that was going to cost him. The dark in the utility corridor was not complete. There was a faint line of light at the base of the door ahead, the door that connected the utility passage to the main corridor of floor 14. The one that Langford's lockdown had not caught because it was on a different circuit, a secondary system, the kind of detail that shows up in building schematics and nowhere else. Caleb knew it was there because he had read those schematics 6 months ago on a slow Tuesday afternoon when Gerald had asked him to cross-reference the floor 14 utility infrastructure against the maintenance manual, and Caleb had done it with the same thoroughness he applied to everything. Not because he had suspected he would need it, but because thoroughness was the habit, and the habit was the thing that kept you alive. He moved toward the light. His toolbox was in his left hand. His tablet was in his right screen, dark, the transmission already sent. He moved along the wall with his shoulder barely touching it, not feeling for the wall, just using it as a reference point, the way you use a railing in the dark, not for support, but for orientation. He reached the door in 40 seconds. He listened. On the other side, footsteps. 2 sets. Moving parallel to the door, rather than toward it, which meant they were sweeping the main corridor, rather than stacking on his position. They didn't know exactly where he was. Langford's announcement had said he'd been located in the restricted infrastructure corridor, but located was doing a lot of work in that sentence. They knew he had been in this section of the building. They didn't have eyes on him. He waited until the footsteps moved past, and then he opened the door. The main corridor of floor 14 was empty in both directions. For the moment, he needed it to be. He stepped through, closed the door behind him without sound, and turned left toward the service elevator bank, which was at the opposite end of the floor from where the footsteps had been heading. He was in the elevator and moving before anyone came back around the corner. He pressed the button for floor 5, his own floor, his territory. He stood in the elevator and thought clearly and fast about what had just happened and what it meant. Langford had moved. The timing of the lockdown minutes after Caleb entered the utility corridor, minutes after Caleb found the device, meant one of two things. Either the device itself had a proximity alert that triggered when someone got close enough to examine it, or Langford had been watching the access logs in real time and had seen Caleb's card scan the floor 14 service corridor at 6 a.m. and understood immediately what it meant. Either way, Langford knew Caleb had found it, which meant Langford also knew that the frame he had been building, the cloned credentials, the setup, the plan to make Caleb the convenient explanation for the breach, was now in danger of collapsing. Because a maintenance tech who finds the device and documents it and transmits the documentation before the lights go out is a maintenance tech who is not behaving like a guilty man. A guilty man runs. Caleb was going to floor 5. He was going to do his job. The elevator opened on 5, and he walked out carrying his toolbox and his tablet, and he updated his maintenance log with the work he had done on 14, the HVAC anomaly inspection, the documentation of a non-standard device attached to the environmental control terminal, submitted formally through the building management system with timestamps and photographs attached. A paper trail that now existed in 3 places, simultaneously. Cole's secure channel, Caleb's tablet, and the building management system that Langford's security team could not access or alter without creating their own documentation problem. He sat down on his overturned bucket in the fifth-floor service corridor. He called Gerald. "Gerald, it's Brooks. I need to let you know I documented a non-standard device in the 14 utility corridor this morning during the anomaly inspection. I submitted it to the system already, but given the building alert that just went out, you're probably going to get some questions about what I was doing up there." "What kind of non-standard device?" Gerald said. His voice had the particular caution of a man who manages facilities for a living and has learned that non-standard device can mean anything from a personal phone charger to something that involves federal agencies. "The kind that needs to be looked at by people above both of us," Caleb said. "It's documented. It's in the system. I just wanted you to hear it from me directly so you're not caught off guard." A pause. "Are you in trouble, Brooks?" "I don't think so," Caleb said. "But I think the building is." Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're the best worker I've had in 20 years. Whatever you need from me to back this up, you've got it." "Thank you, Gerald." He hung up. He looked at the corridor wall for a moment. Then his phone, the secure one, vibrated. Cole got the transmission. All of it. Clear. "I'm with the delegation, and I've made contact with federal liaisons. They're pulling the building management records now. Caleb, they need you visible and accessible. Don't hide." Caleb read that twice. Then he wrote back, "I'm on 5, sitting on my bucket." Cole, after a moment, "Of course you are." Victor Langford came to floor 5 40 minutes later. He didn't come alone. He had 2 of his security staff with him. Not Mitchell or Price, the 2 men Caleb had started to trust, but the contractors. The ones Mitchell had flagged. The one with the inconsistent employment record in the system. Caleb saw them coming from the far end of the corridor. He was standing now, he had been sitting, but something had told him to stand, some internal early warning instrument that had been calibrated over years and still ran quietly, even when he wasn't listening for it. He was standing with his back to the wall, near the utility closet tablet in his left hand, and he watched them approach with the specific attentiveness of someone who has already decided how this moment is going to go. Langford was in his 50s. The kind of 50s that had been well maintained. He was trim, well-dressed even in the casual emergency of a building lockdown, with the clipped authority of a man who was accustomed to being the most important security presence in any room he entered. His face was composed, professional. The expression of a man managing a situation. It was a good expression. Caleb had worn that expression before in another life. He knew what it was covering. "Mr. Brooks," Langford said, stopping a few feet away. His voice was smooth, carrying the precise register of concern without alarm. "I'm glad we found you. There's been a security incident in the building this morning, and we need to discuss your access to floor 14. "Happy to discuss it," Caleb said. "I have a maintenance ticket for the HVAC anomaly inspection on 14 filed 2 days ago, authorized by Gerald Hutchins, executed this morning under my expanded access clearance, which was approved and documented by Ms. Whitmore on Tuesday." He held up the tablet. "I also documented a non-standard device I found attached to the HVAC control terminal, which I've already submitted to the building management system. I transmitted copies to a federal security contact as well, given the nature of what the device appeared to be doing." Something moved behind Langford's eyes. It was brief, barely a flicker, but Caleb had been watching for it. "A non-standard device," Langford said. His tone had not changed. That was discipline. "Can you describe it?" "It's in the documentation," Caleb said. "Photographs, wiring, configuration, serial numbers from the circuit board. I can forward it to you directly if you haven't pulled it from the system yet." The 2 contractors had positioned themselves slightly behind and to either side of Langford. Caleb noted their positions without looking directly at them, one at his 2 o'clock, one at his 7. Standard flanking for a security contact situation with a potential subject. He noted it the same way he noted a loose wire in a control panel clinically for future reference. "I'm going to need you to come with us," Langford said, "for your own security while we sort out what happened on 14. "I appreciate that," Caleb said. "But I've already spoken with Ms. Whitmore this morning, and I've notified my supervisor, and I've transmitted my documentation to a federal contact. so I'm comfortable staying right here." He paused. "For my own security." Langford looked at him. It was a different kind of look than the ones Caleb had been receiving in this building. This was not dismissal. This was not the casual disregard of a man who had decided the uniform told the whole story. This was the look of a man who had just recalibrated and was now seeing something he had not prepared for and was deciding quickly what to do about it. "You said federal contact," Langford said. "General Nathan Cole," Caleb said. "He's with your government delegation this morning. He's been briefed." 3 seconds. That was how long Victor Langford stood still. In those 3 seconds, Caleb watched the calculation happen. Watched the man run through his options the way a chess player runs through the board. Not panicked, not impulsive, but fast and precise, and increasingly aware that the position he had spent months constructing had just been compromised in a way that couldn't be patched. "I see," Langford said. Then he turned, and he walked back the way he had come, and the 2 contractors went with him. Caleb watched them go. He waited until they were through the door at the end of the corridor. Then he picked up the secure phone and typed, "He knows I have it. He's moving. Whatever the endpoint is, he'll try to accelerate it. Cole delegation is being moved to a secure briefing now. Federal liaisons are pulling Langford's physical access. But Caleb, we have a problem." "Caleb." "What problem?" "Cole Voss, the contractor with the bad record. He was just flagged at the floor 12 server access point. The lockdown didn't catch him because his clearance reads as valid to the automated system. He's inside the secure infrastructure." Caleb stared at the screen. Cole and Langford just requested that the delegation briefing be moved to the floor 14 conference room, the one adjacent to the server corridor. Caleb was already moving. The stairwell from 5 to 12 took him 40 seconds. He went fast, but not reckless. The distinction his daughter had named, the one he had tried to explain at the dinner table, was alive in him now, in a way that was less philosophical and more visceral. Brave was moving quickly toward a hard thing because the reason was bigger than the fear. Reckless was moving quickly and forgetting to think. He was thinking. I was thinking about what Voss being inside the secure infrastructure meant. Not the HVAC bridge device that was already documented, already transmitted, already in the hands of people who could act on it through channels that didn't require Caleb to be anywhere. What Voss needed to do now with the frame collapsing, and Langford aware that the documentation existed, was different. He needed to execute whatever the final step was before the window closed. And the final step, the thing that all the months of preparation had been building toward, was not moving data through the air conditioning system in tiny fragments. That had been the preparation. The final step was something faster. Caleb hit the floor 12 landing and went through the door. The floor 12 server corridor was quieter than 14. It had a different use profile, less primary infrastructure, more backup and overflow systems, and Langford's people hadn't flooded it the way they'd covered 14. Caleb could see the corridor was empty, except for one figure at the far end at the server room access panel, working with the focused speed of someone who knows they are on a clock. Harlan Voss. How was medium height with the compact build of someone who spent time training without wanting it to be obvious. He had an access card in his left hand and a drive small gray, the kind that looked like a standard system backup device and was not in his right. He heard Caleb's footsteps and turned. For a moment they looked at each other. "Walk away," Voss said. His voice was flat, professional, the tone of someone who had prepared a variety of responses to a variety of situations and was selecting from a menu. "That's not going to happen," Caleb said. "I'm authorized security personnel," Voss said. "You're a maintenance tech. You're not supposed to be on this floor." "I have expanded access clearance," Caleb said. "Documented. Want to compare paperwork." Voss looked at him, and then he moved. How was fast. He was trained. Whatever his background actually was, not the one in the falsified system record, but the real one. It had involved people who knew what they were doing, teaching him to move through space efficiently and without hesitation. The problem was that Caleb had been watching him move for the 3 seconds they'd been talking, and 3 seconds was enough. It was more than enough. Voss came in high and fast, trying to use momentum to overwhelm a target he believed was untrained. Caleb sidestepped the same way he'd sidestepped in the training room, not dramatically, not with any wasted energy, just by not being where Voss's force was going and redirecting that force downward and forward. Voss hit the corridor wall with the side of his shoulder rather than Caleb, and in the moment of contact, Caleb's hand closed around the wrist holding the drive. I didn't break the wrist. He didn't need to. He applied exactly enough pressure to the specific joint that controlled grip strength, and Voss's hand opened, and the drive was in Caleb's hand, and Voss was off balance against the wall, and Caleb stepped back and let him find his footing. Voss turned. His face had changed. Not to anger. Anger was for people who hadn't processed what had just happened yet. His face had changed to something more considered. A reassessment. "Don't," Caleb said, quietly, the same way he said most things. Voss looked at the drive in Caleb's hand. He looked at Caleb. He made the calculation. Then he ran. Not at Caleb, back toward the end of the corridor, the way he had come in. Caleb let him go. I wasn't interested in catching Voss. Voss, without the drive, was a man with bad paperwork and a story that was going to unravel itself in the next few hours. Voss was Cole's problem, and the federal liaison's problem, and eventually a courtroom's problem. The drive was Caleb's problem right now. He held it and thought about what was on it. Then he put it in his toolbox, closed the latch, and called the secure phone. Cole answered on the first ring. "I have the drive," Caleb said. A beat of silence that carried more weight than anything Cole had said all morning. "You have it." Voss ran. "He'll try to exit the building. You'll want to close the ground floor." "Already happening," Cole said. "Federal agents are in the building. Caleb, are you all right? I'm in the floor 12 server corridor, with a drive that I assume contains the compiled architecture data that the HVAC bridge device spent 8 months assembling fragment by fragment." "That's yes. That's what we believe it is." "Then I'm going to sit here in the floor 12 server corridor and wait for someone with federal credentials to come and take it from me properly," Caleb said, "because I am not carrying this thing through an active building sweep without a chain of custody." "That's..." Cole stopped. "Then, that's exactly right. Stay there. I'm sending someone to you directly. 2 minutes." "Copy," Caleb said. He sat down on the floor of the corridor with his back against the wall, the same way he'd sat in service corridors and utility passages and the unglamorous in-between spaces of this building. For the past 8 months, eating turkey sandwiches and thinking about fractions and listening to the building tell him things it didn't know it was saying. He put the toolbox between his feet. He waited. The federal agents who reached him were professional and efficient and treated him from the first moment with the specific courtesy that people extend when they understand they are dealing with someone who has just done something significant and could have handled it much less carefully and chose not to. He handed over the drive with a verbal accounting of how he'd come to have it. The corridor, the contact with Voss, the sequence of events, and the senior agent. A woman named Torres, who had no relation to the Torres on Langford's security team, and who listened with the complete attention of someone who was going to remember every word, wrote it down, and then said, "We're going to need a formal statement, Mr. Brooks, this morning if possible." "Fine," Caleb said. "Are you injured?" "No." She looked at him in the way that people look at someone when the answer they got is the answer they expected, and they're confirming rather than asking. "All right, come with me." He stood up, picked up his toolbox, followed her. They passed Langford's contractors in the corridor outside the elevator, 2 of them, not Voss, being walked by federal agents in the crisp, low-drama way that federal agents walk people when the situation is contained. They passed a cluster of Whitmore administrative staff who had come out of their offices to watch, which was what administrative staff always did in emergencies, regardless of what they'd been told, and Caleb moved through them without making eye contact. He found Mitchell and Price near the elevator bank on 10. They had clearly been in the middle of the delegation escort duty when everything changed, and they were standing now with the careful alertness of trained people in an uncertain situation who have decided to hold position until they understand what they're holding position for. Mitchell saw him first. "Brooks," he said. And the way he said it, it wasn't a question. It wasn't a challenge. It was something closer to relief. What happened? The building went into lockdown, and then Langford came over the intercom, and now there are federal agents on every floor and nobody is telling us anything. Langford is the problem, Caleb said. Not a problem, the problem. He's been running a data extraction operation out of this building for months. It's over. Federal agents have the documentation and the device and the drive. Mitchell stared at him. Price looked at Caleb with the careful expression of a man who is processing something that is restructuring several things simultaneously. Langford, he said. Not a question. The word of a man confirming that a thing he refused to believe has turned out to be real. He used my credentials to cover his tracks, Caleb said. Cloned my card. Made it look like the maintenance tech had been accessing restricted infrastructure. Mitchell said. That's why he moved us off the regular rotation this morning. He needed his people in position and yours out of the way, Caleb said. Mitchell looked at him. And you walked into the middle of it. I walked into the part I could handle, Caleb said. A beat. What do we do? Price said. You do your job, Caleb said. The federal agents are running the building security right now. Support them. Answer their questions. Cooperate fully. Your team is going to have a lot to sort out in the next few days, but none of it is on you. He paused. And someone should check on the government delegation. They're probably in a holding position somewhere on 15, and nobody's given them a clear briefing. Price pulled out his radio. Mitchell didn't move yet. He was still looking at Caleb with the expression he'd been wearing for 3 days now, the one that was still in the process of understanding what it was looking at. Your left side, he said. Caleb looked at him. You said I leave my left side open. Is that still true, or did I imagine you saying that in the middle of everything? Still true, Caleb said. Will you actually look at our training program after this, when things are after? Caleb thought about it. I thought about what he had said to Olivia 2 days ago. That he could see this thing, and he couldn't choose not to look at it. He thought about the version of that which applied not to corruption and not to betrayal, but to a group of 5 men who had laughed at him and had been wrong not because of what they'd done to him, but because of what it had done to them, made them worse at their jobs, made them less safe, made them the kind of security team that a maintenance worker could put on the floor in 8 seconds because they had decided their performance was better spent on contempt than on practice. He thought about the fact that he had told Mitchell to ask him again in a few weeks. Yeah, he said. I'll look at it. Mitchell nodded. Once. Slowly. Then Caleb followed the federal agent toward the elevator. The formal statement took 2 hours. High gave it in a conference room on the 3rd floor. His floor. The floor he knew to Agent Torres and 2 of her colleagues, and he gave it with the same precision and completeness that he applied to everything, because the statement was evidence, and evidence needed to be clean. He told them what he had found, how he had found it, what he understood it to mean, and how he had come to look for it. He did not minimize the role Cole had played. He did not overstate his own. He described events in sequence, used specific times and locations, and answered every clarifying question they asked. At one point, Torres said, Your background, Mr. Brooks, the file we have on you from... There isn't much of a file, Caleb said. No, she agreed. There isn't. There's a gap. There's a gap, he confirmed. She looked at him. Should there be more? That's a question for General Cole, Caleb said. What I can tell you is that everything I've done in this building today is in the maintenance log and the building management system and the secure transmission to Cole's channel. My actions in this building today are documented. The gap in my file is a different matter. Torres considered that. Then she wrote something down and moved on. When it was finished, Caleb walked out of the conference room and found Nathan Cole waiting in the hallway. Cole was alone. No delegation, no official posture. Just an older man in a hallway standing with his hands in his pockets who looked at Caleb with an expression that was tired and relieved, and something else that Caleb recognized as the particular feeling of reaching the end of a long road that you were not certain you were going to reach. It's done, Cole said. The documentation holds. Everything you transmitted, everything on the drive, the device, the financial record I built, it's solid. Federal prosecutors are going to have what they need. Cole paused. Langford was picked up trying to leave the building through the parking structure. He didn't say anything. He's smart enough not to say anything yet. But with what we have, he doesn't need to say anything. Caleb nodded. And Voss, he said. Ground floor. He made it as far as the lobby before they closed it. He's been significantly less quiet than Langford, which is probably going to be worse for him in the long run. Caleb almost smiled. People talk when they're scared. They do, Cole said. He paused. You were right not to touch Langford directly. I know what it would have been easy to do, and I know what you chose instead, and... Don't, Caleb said. Cole stopped. Don't make it about choice, Caleb said. I didn't choose not to hurt him because I'm a better person than he is. I chose not to hurt him because what he did to my team deserves a courtroom, not a corridor. Because my daughter deserves a father who comes home having done this the right way. He looked at Cole steadily. If you tell that story as something virtuous about me personally, you're missing the point. Cole was quiet for a moment. All right, he said. What's the point? The point, Caleb said, is that systems exist for a reason. The documentation, the chain of custody, the legal process. Those things exist because individual judgment, including mine, is not a substitute for accountability. If I had handled Langford my way in a corridor with my hands, I would have given him exactly what he needed. A story about the black maintenance worker who attacked a senior company executive. I would have collapsed the case. I would have been the decoy he designed me to be. He paused. He counted on me being angry, Caleb said. And I am angry. I will probably always be angry about Marcus and Davion and Aisha. But angry is something you carry. It doesn't get to drive. Cole looked at him for a long time. How are you? Cole said. Not the official version, the real one. Caleb checked his watch. 2:47 p.m. I have a school bus to meet in 33 minutes, he said. I'm going to be exactly on time. Cole smiled. It was a real one, not the controlled, measured thing that authority produces in professional contexts, but the kind that shows up when something you've been worried about turns out to be okay. Go, Cole said. Caleb picked up his toolbox. Then he stopped. Nathan, he said. Cole looked at him. The people he worked with. The ones who paid for what happened to my team. They're still out there. I know, Cole said. This drive, this documentation, does it give you enough to pull the thread further back? Cole looked at him steadily. Possibly. It'll take time. I know it'll take time, Caleb said. I'm not asking for a timeline. I'm asking whether you're going to keep pulling. Yes, Cole said. I'm going to keep pulling. Caleb nodded. Then tell me when you find something, he said. I'm not coming back in. I'm not picking up a case file. But tell me when you find something. I will, Cole said. Caleb walked toward the elevator. The building around him was still moving, agents in corridors, staff returning to their spaces cautiously, the specific low-grade hum of an institution that has been shaken and is beginning the process of deciding what it looks like on the other side. He pressed the lobby button. He thought about Maya. He thought about her question from 3 weeks ago, the one that had moved through him, the way real questions move not on the surface, but all the way through, changing the texture of things as it went. What's the difference between brave and reckless? He rode the elevator down. He walked through the lobby, past the glass doors, out into the Cincinnati afternoon. And then Victor Langford's voice found him one more time. Not through a building intercom, not with authority. Not with the composed, professional smoothness of the man who had spent months building a frame around the person he thought would never see it coming. From across the lobby, being walked by 2 federal agents toward the exit on the opposite side. Langford turned and looked at him. Just looked. For 1 second. And whatever Langford saw in Caleb's face in that second, whatever was actually visible under the stillness, under the maintenance uniform, under the toolbox, and the 4 years, and the chosen life, and the school bus, and the fractions. It made something in Langford's composed expression. Fracture. Not much. A hairline crack. The specific fracture of a man who built a plan around a premise, and is in the process of understanding that the premise was wrong from the beginning. Caleb held his gaze for exactly long enough. Then he turned and walked out the door. The afternoon was warm. The city was doing what cities do, moving indifferent, full of its own concerns. He walked to the parking structure, got in his car, and drove toward Garfield Street. He thought about dinner. He thought about what Maya was going to tell him about her day. I thought that whatever she told him, he was going to listen to all of it. He was going to sit across from her at the small kitchen table and listen like it was the most important thing anyone had said to him all day. Because it was. Because it always was. Because that was the thing he had chosen 4 years ago in the aftermath of everything, and he had not stopped choosing it since. He pulled onto Garfield Street at 3:17. I was in front of the building when the school bus appeared at the end of the block. 3:20 exactly. He got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, and when Maya came down the bus steps and saw him, she ran the last 10 feet, the way she always did, not because she was a small child who couldn't control her speed, but because she was 8 years old, and she had decided that running the last 10 feet toward her father was the appropriate response to seeing him, and Maya had very considered reasons for the things she decided. She hit him at full speed, and he caught her and lifted her and held her, and she said into his shoulder, "Dad, the most ridiculous thing happened at school today," Mrs. Patterson said. "Fractions aren't on the test next week, but they're definitely on the test next week. I have evidence." He carried her toward the building with one arm. "Tell me everything," he said. And she did. The days that followed had a different texture than the days before them. Not quieter exactly. If anything, the building was louder, more crowded, more disrupted than it had been in all the months Caleb had worked there. Federal agents moved through the corridors with the specific, unhurried authority of people who have all the time they need because the situation is already resolved, and what remains is simply the careful work of documentation and interview and the construction of a legal case that would hold. Administrative staff clustered in doorways and spoke in the lowered voices of people processing something that had happened in their building to their company and that they were still deciding how to understand. Caleb went to work. He showed up at 6:58 on the morning after swiped his badge at the service entrance, took the freight elevator to 3, and started his shift. The HVAC filter on floor 4 needed replacing. It had been on his list for a week, and he hadn't gotten to it. He replaced it. He addressed a lighting issue on floor 6 that had been generating a slow burn complaint from the accounting department for 11 days. He updated his log. He ate his sandwich on the overturned bucket in the 5th floor service corridor. Gerald stopped by at noon. He didn't say much. He stood in the corridor with his cap in his hands. He had taken it off, which Caleb noted, because Gerald was never without the cap, and he looked at Caleb with the expression of a man who has been doing a job for a long time and has just discovered that one of the people he manages is significantly more than what the job description said. "I just wanted to check on you," Gerald said. "I'm fine," Caleb said. "The filter on 4 was overdue. I got it." Gerald looked at him. "That's not what I meant." "I know," Caleb said. He looked up at his supervisor. "I'm okay, Gerald. Really." Gerald put his cap back on, adjusted the brim. "You know when I told you that you were the best worker I'd had in 20 years? He said, "I didn't know what I was saying." "You knew exactly what you were saying," Caleb said. "You were saying I show up and I fix things the right way the first time." Gerald considered that. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I guess I was." He paused. "Still true." He walked back toward the elevator. Caleb watched him go and felt something that was simple and clean and didn't need a name. The feeling of being seen accurately by someone who didn't need the full picture to get the important part right. He finished his lunch and went back to work. Olivia Whitmore called him to her office on the 3rd day. He went up at 2 in the afternoon, still in his coveralls, and Patricia waved him straight through without picking up the phone this time, which was its own small thing that Caleb noted without commenting on. Olivia was behind her desk when he entered. She stood up when he came in, stood up the way you stand for someone you're acknowledging, and gestured to the chair across from her. This time he sat. "The federal case is moving quickly," she said. "Agent Torres told me this morning that the documentation you compiled combined with what General Cole brought and what was on the drive gives them everything they need for a prosecution. She paused. Victor is going to be in a courtroom for a long time. Good, Caleb said. The company is going to take a hit, she said. There will be questions about oversight about how someone could operate inside our infrastructure for this long without detection. Those are fair questions, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. She looked at him directly. But we're going to answer them honestly, and we're going to fix what needs to be fixed, and the company is going to be better on the other side of this than it was before. I believe that, Caleb said. She was quiet for a moment. I want to offer you a position, she said. Head of Security for Whitmore Technologies. Full authority, full compensation, the ability to rebuild the security program from the ground up. She said it plainly without flourish, the way she said things when she meant them entirely. You have earned that role 20 times over in the past week alone, and that's before I account for the 8 months you've spent in this building, knowing things about its infrastructure that our security team didn't know. Caleb looked at her. I'm going to say no, he said. She had expected it. He could tell she didn't blink, didn't adjust. She had prepared herself for the answer before she asked the question, which was the right way to make an offer you're not certain of. Can I ask why? She said. Because I'm not trying to build something here, he said. Not a title, not a position, not a career in the professional sense. I built something already. It's on Garfield Street and it takes the school bus home at 3:20 and it has opinions about fractions. He paused. That's the thing I'm protecting. Everything else comes second to that. Olivia looked at him for a long moment. Then what can I offer you? She said. Because I'm not comfortable with the idea of you going back to replacing lighting panels on floor 4 and pretending none of this happened. I don't need you to be comfortable with it, he said. I've been comfortable with it for 8 months. Caleb. She used his first name for the first time. It landed differently than anything else she had said. What do you need? Not what you'll accept. What do you actually need? I thought about it honestly because she was asking honestly. I need my job to stay my job, he said. I need the schedule that gets me to the school bus. I need it not to become something complicated. He paused. But if you want to do something useful, there's a security training program on 17 that needs rebuilding from the foundation. Not the tactical curriculum. The philosophy underneath it. What it means to protect people, why it matters what kind of character it actually requires. He met her eyes. That's work I can contribute to, informally, alongside the job I already have. Olivia was quiet. Then she said, That's a smaller ask than you're entitled to make. I know, he said. It's also the right one. She nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. A pause. And the compensation, your maintenance salary, is going to be adjusted. Don't argue with me about it. You've been doing more than your job description since day one, and the pay scale is going to reflect that. He looked at her. Don't argue, she said again, with a tone that carried something almost like warmth. You can keep the bucket. He almost smiled. Deal. Ryan Mitchell came to floor 5 on the 4th day. He didn't track Caleb down this time. Caleb was in the main corridor servicing the electrical panel near the stairwell, visible, not hard to find. Mitchell walked up with the directness of someone who had been working up to something and had decided to stop working up to it. I told Price what you said, Mitchell said, about the left side. And? Caleb said, not stopping what he was doing. He watched footage of my last 3 qualification drills. Mitchell paused. He said it was embarrassing. It's fixable, Caleb said. Yeah, you said that. A beat. The whole team said they want you to look at the program, not just me asking this time. Torres, Kaufman, Webb, all of them. Price drafted a formal request to Whitmore. Caleb secured the panel cover, turned around. Mitchell was standing with his arms at his sides and his jaw set, not with the old performing certainty, but with something quieter and more effortful. The look of a man who is holding himself accountable in the specific way that requires not making it easy on yourself. I need to say something to you, Mitchell said. You already apologized, Caleb said. I apologized for what I did in the training room. That's not the same as what I'm trying to say now. He stopped, started again. I spent my whole career being trained to assess threats, to read situations, to identify what I was dealing with and respond appropriately. His jaw worked slightly. And I walked into a room, and I saw your uniform, and I decided I was done assessing. I decided the uniform was the answer." He paused. "That's not just rude. That's a professional failure. I was worse at my job because I made an assumption about who you were, and that assumption made me lazy, and lazy in this work gets people hurt." Caleb looked at him. "I'm saying I understand now that the problem wasn't just about treating you badly as a person," Mitchell continued. "It's that the same bias that made me dismiss you is the same bias that made me miss the warning signs about Langford. I wasn't looking at what was actually in front of me. I was looking at what I expected to see." He paused. "You saw Langford. From the maintenance corridor on 5, with a toolbox." "I saw the data," Caleb said, "and I knew how to look at it." "Because of who you are," Mitchell said, "which I had no idea about, because I didn't look." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Mitchell," he said. "Yeah. The reason I'm going to help with your training program is not to fix what happened between you and me in that training room. That's already handled. The reason I'm going to help is because your team protects people for a living, and I've seen what you can do when you're operating at the standard you're actually capable of, and it's better than what I saw that day. You're better than what I saw that day." Mitchell looked at him. "All 5 of you are," Caleb said, "and you'll be better still." It was not a speech. He didn't deliver it like one. He said it the way he said everything, evenly, without performance, with the particular weight of something that was simply true and didn't need decoration. Mitchell received it the same way, not with gratitude, exactly, something more useful than that, something that looked like purpose. "First session," Mitchell said. 2 weeks, Caleb said. "Give the building time to settle." 2 weeks, Mitchell said. He put out his hand. Caleb shook it. He told Maya that night. Not everything. She was 8 years old, and 8-year-olds did not need the full architecture of what had happened inside Whitmore Technologies. The HVAC bridge device, the cloned credentials, the man named Victor Langford, who had made choices that killed people 4 years ago and had been trying to build on top of those choices ever since. But he told her some of it. He told her that something had happened at work, that someone had been doing something wrong inside the building for a long time, and he had been able to help stop it. That it had been complicated, and he was glad it was done. Maya listened to this with the focused, evaluating attention she brought to most things, the same quality she brought to math worksheets and to conversations about whether fractions were actually useful, and to the question of whether Mrs. Patterson was bluffing about the test. When he finished, she said, "Were you scared?" "Yes," he said. "But you did it anyway." "Yes." She considered this. "That's what you said about brave," she said. "That brave people are scared too. That's what makes it brave." "That's right," he said. She was quiet for a moment. She was looking at her plate where the turkey pasta with extra cheese was doing exactly what it always did, which was sit there being her favorite food. Then she looked up at him. "Dad," she said, "the people at your work, the security guys, did they figure out they were wrong about you?" He thought about that. About Mitchell and the handshake. About Price's careful eyes reassembling the picture. About Kaufman and Torres and Webb watching from the floor of the training room with the expressions of men who had just been asked a question in a language they thought they spoke. "Yeah," he said. "They did." "Good," Maya said with the simplicity and finality of someone for whom this was the expected and correct outcome. She picked up her fork. "Did you tell them people's uniforms don't tell you their worth?" He looked at her. "Their choices do," she said. "That's what you always say." He had said that. He had said it in a training room on floor 17 to 5 men on the floor in the aftermath of 8 seconds that had reordered everyone's understanding of the situation. He had not known when he said it that Maya had stored that phrase somewhere, that she had filed it in the specific place where 8-year-olds keep the things their parents say that they have decided to keep. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I told them that." Did they listen? He thought about Mitchell, about the handshake, about the formal request Price had drafted, about Gerald standing in the corridor with his cap in his hands saying, "I didn't know what I was saying," about Olivia standing up when he entered the room. "They listened," he said. Maya nodded, satisfied. She ate her pasta. Caleb sat across from her and did the same. And in the small kitchen on Garfield Street, with the overhead light warm and the window dark and the sound of the building settling around them, the most important thing in Caleb Brooks' life was exactly where it had always been, across a kitchen table, eating turkey pasta with extra cheese, already thinking about the next question. 3 weeks later, the first training session on Floor 17 ran for 2 hours. All 5 of them were there: Mitchell, Price, Torres, Kaufman, Webb. They were in training gear, and they were ready, and they had the particular alert stillness of people who know they are about to be taught something true and have decided in advance to receive it without resistance. Caleb stood in the center of the training floor. He was not in his maintenance coveralls. He was in the plain dark clothing he wore when he was doing this kind of work. The clothing that had no label and no insignia, and said nothing about who he was, except through the way he stood in it, which was the same way he stood in everything, which was the only way he knew how to stand. He looked at the 5 of them. "First thing," he said, "what happened in this room 3 weeks ago? The drill that Mitchell started. I want you to tell me what you saw." A brief silence. Mitchell said, "We saw a maintenance worker, and we decided to use him as a training prop." And we were wrong," Price said, "on multiple levels." "Tell me the levels," Caleb said. Price thought about it. "We assumed that what we saw was all there was. We didn't gather information, we just acted on an assumption. That's a tactical error." "What else, Torres?" "We underestimated the variable. We didn't account for the possibility that the unknown person in the room might be a greater threat than any of us." "What else?" A pause. Webb said quietly, "We treated a person like he wasn't one, like he was furniture. And we did it because of how he was dressed and how he looked, and that was wrong, regardless of the tactical problem." Caleb looked at Webb. "That's the one," Caleb said. "That's the one that matters most. Not because the tactical errors aren't real, they are, and we're going to work on them. But because the tactical errors happened because of that last one. You were lazy with your assessment because you had already decided he wasn't worth assessing. And that decision didn't come from your training. It came from somewhere underneath your training. Something you were carrying before you ever walked into this room." He paused. "The first job of a protection specialist is not to be fast. It's not to be strong. It's not to be technically correct under pressure. The first job is to see clearly. And you cannot see clearly if you've decided in advance what you're looking at." The room was quiet. "Everything we do in this program starts from there," Caleb said. "Not from tactics, from honesty. From the willingness to look at what is actually in front of you, and not the version of it that's easier to manage." He let that sit for a moment. "That's hard. It's probably the hardest thing I'm going to ask of you. The rest of it, the technique, the response protocols, the calibration work, that's discipline and repetition, and we can build it. But the willingness to see clearly when what you see challenges something you assumed, that's character, and I can't give you that. You have to bring it." Mitchell was looking at him with the expression he had been wearing with various degrees of intensity since the day. In the training room, the expression of a man who is in the process of becoming something he wasn't. 3 weeks ago, and is discovering that the process is uncomfortable and worthwhile in roughly equal measure. "We'll bring it," Mitchell said. Caleb looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "I know you will." He moved them into the first drill. 6 weeks after the events inside the Meridian building, Victor Langford was formally indicted on 17 counts by a federal grand jury. The charges included espionage, conspiracy, computer fraud, and violations of federal security statutes that carried sentences. Langford's lawyers were not going to be able to negotiate down to anything comfortable. Harlan Voss cooperated with investigators early enough to reduce his own exposure and provided testimony that supported the digital evidence already in federal hands. The financial thread that Cole had pulled, the one that connected Langford to the fund that had paid for the operation 4 years ago, led slowly and carefully to 2 additional individuals whose names Caleb received through the secure phone in a message from Cole that arrived on a Tuesday morning while he was replacing a burned ballast on floor 4. Cole's message said, 2 more. It'll take time, but the thread is holding. Caleb wrote back, "Pull it." He put the phone in his pocket and finished the ballast. On a Saturday morning in early November, Caleb took Maya to the park 2 blocks from their apartment. It was the kind of morning that Cincinnati produced occasionally in the fall. Cold enough to need a jacket, but with a sky so clear and blue, it felt like the year's last good argument for optimism before winter settled in. Maya ran, ahead of him on the path, the way she always did, because she had the philosophy that the correct pace for moving through a park was as fast as possible, and she had never encountered a counter-argument that satisfied her. He watched her. How was carrying 2 coffees his own and a hot chocolate for Maya, which she called coffee in a recent and non-negotiable renegotiation of her beverage identity. He was wearing his old jacket, the one with the paint on the left sleeve that had been there since the apartment before this one. He was thinking about something Cole had said to him in the hallway outside the conference room on the day everything was resolved. "Why are you doing this?" That was what Olivia had asked him. Not Cole. But Cole had asked something adjacent to it in his own way in the training room on the first day. He had asked it by looking at a man in a maintenance uniform with the eyes of someone who recognized something and was deciding whether the recognition was enough to build on. Caleb thought about the answer he had given Olivia. Because I can see it. Because choosing not to look at a thing that is going to hurt people is not peace. It is a different kind of damage. He thought about whether that answer was complete. I thought it was approximately complete. But there was something underneath it that he had not said to Olivia, because it was not the kind of thing you say in a CEO's office, in a deliberate conversation about security breaches and institutional responsibility. It was the kind of thing you carry with you on a Saturday morning in a park, watching your daughter run ahead of you on a path, and hold quietly without needing to show it to anyone. The something underneath it was this. He had spent 4 years building a quiet life, not because the quiet was what he needed, but because the people he had trusted with his life had their lives taken by someone who should have protected them, and the weight of that had been so enormous and so shapeless that the only way he had found to hold it without being destroyed by it was to make everything else very small and very clear. The apartment, the schedule, the school bus, the fractions, the turkey sandwich with no mustard, and that had worked. It had been exactly right for exactly as long as it needed to be. But Victor Langford had walked into the building he was working in, and Marcus Webb and Davion Cole and Aisha Reyes were still owed something, and Caleb had looked at the thing he could see and chosen not to look away from it. And on the other side of that choice with Langford in federal custody, and the thread still being pulled, and his daughter running ahead of him. In the cold, clear morning, he felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Not closure. He didn't believe in closure. He believed in continuation, the decision to keep moving forward in a direction that honored the people you had lost without letting their loss define the only thing you were. He felt simply, and without ceremony, that he was in the right place. Doing the right thing. Being the right thing. Not for anyone's assessment, not for a title or a position, or the approval of the people who had laughed at his uniform and been wrong about it, but for himself, and for his daughter, and for the 3 people whose names he said on certain nights when the apartment was quiet, and the old weight came back, and who deserved to be remembered by someone who was still stubbornly and precisely, and with everything he had standing. "Dad," Maya called from up ahead. She had stopped at the park bench where they usually sat and was pointing at something, a dog, large and enthusiastic, whose owner was trying with limited success to manage the leash situation. "Dad, come look at this dog." He walked toward her. Not quickly, not slowly. With the deliberate, settled pace of a man who knows where he is going and is not in a hurry to be anywhere else. He reached the bench. The dog turned out to be a golden retriever with an excess of personality and very little respect for personal space. And Maya had immediately made friends with it in the complete and unconditional way she made friends with animals, which was simply by being present and willing, and entirely without pretense. He handed her the hot chocolate she called coffee. She took it without looking away from the dog. He sat down on the bench and drank his actual coffee and watched his daughter in the cold blue morning and thought about all of it. The training room, the dark utility corridor, the 5 men on the floor, the clock that had been counting down in the air conditioning system for 8 months, the drive in his toolbox, the handshake with Mitchell. The formal request, Price had drafted Langford's face in the lobby, fracturing along a hairline crack as he understood what he had miscalculated. I thought about what he had told the 5 men in their first training session. A person's uniform does not tell you their worth. Their choices do. He thought about the choices he had made, the ones he was still making, the ones he would make tomorrow and the day after that, and on every morning that started at 5:45 with the alarm he didn't need, and the coffee he made in the dark, and the 30 seconds of silence before the day came in. I thought that the choices taken together made a person. Not the title, not the credential, not the career, or the badge, or the history that someone with access to the right files might or might not find. The choices taken one at a time, each one made in the knowledge that it would be followed by another, and that the sum of them was the only biography that ultimately mattered. He had made some wrong ones. He would make more. That was not failure. That was the condition of being human and moving through a world that did not hold still. But the ones that counted, the ones he had made in the dark corridor, and the CEO's office, and the training room, and the kitchen on Garfield Street, those were his. They were clean. They were his. The golden retriever had now progressed to trying to sit in Maya's lap, which was ambitious given the size differential. Maya was delighted. "Dad," she said, looking up at him with her face bright and certain and entirely herself. "I think we need a dog." "We don't need a dog," he said. "I think the evidence suggests otherwise," she said. He looked at her, at the way she held her argument, at the exactness and the confidence and the 8-year-old certainty that a reasonable case presented clearly would produce a reasonable outcome. "Let's talk about it at home," he said, which was not no. She recognized that it was not no, and the brightness in her face went up another degree, and she turned back to the dog with the expression of someone who has just received a favorable preliminary ruling and is proceeding accordingly. Caleb Brooks sat on the bench in the cold blue morning, drinking his coffee, watching his daughter make her case to a golden retriever who was already completely on her side. I was not the head of security at Whitmore Technologies. He was not a classified operative or a tactical instructor or anything that would appear on a document in a file that someone might or might not be able to find. He was a maintenance technician on floors 3 through 7, with a salary that had been recently and non-negotiably adjusted, and twice a month on Saturday mornings, he drove to the Meridian building and walked into the security training facility on floor 17 and taught 5 men how to see clearly. I was a single father who made turkey sandwiches with no mustard and helped with fractions and sat on the edge of a bed and listened to his daughter breathe, and had made a decision 4 years ago that he had not stopped making every day since. He was the man in the wrong uniform who turned out to be exactly the right person, and that all of that held together, chosen and rechosen, and carried without need for applause or acknowledgement, or any of the visible markers that the world uses to decide what something is worth. That was enough. That had always been enough. That was the thing that 5 laughing men in a training room had never understood, and that the quiet, exact 8-second truth of a single moment had forced them to reckon with. Real strength does not need a stage. It does not need a title. It does not need the room to know its name. It only needs to be present, steady, clear-eyed, and unshakable when the moment arrives that requires it. And Caleb Brooks had always without fail been exactly that.